Hey there. Welcome back to Dreamland Encounters. I share stories of otherworldly experiences to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Drop a comment and let me know where you're joining from. Get comfy and settle in. Work had been grinding me down, 12-hour shifts at the plant that left me feeling trapped on my couch at home. The lake was my escape, a place to quiet my mind. That night, taking my old boat out with a cheap Coleman lantern in the bow and the cabin's dock light off to keep the bugs away. Midnight had passed, and a thin silver moon hung low. The summer heat had broken, replaced by air so crisp and clean it made me pull my jacket collar tight. For an hour I'd been casting lines, catching only smallmouth bass and my own restless thoughts. The lake was perfectly still, a mirror reflecting the sky, stars scattered like ash across its black surface. Only the occasional boat creak and distant frog sounds broke the silence. No wind stirred the water. Something felt off first with the fish. My line strike indicator twitched softly, almost politely. Then ripples began forming around the boat, perfect concentric circles, as if someone was skipping stones, but no stones were visible. They spread past the gunwale and vanished without a sound, like the lake was clearing its throat. I tried to convince myself everything was normal, just insects under the water's surface, maybe a strange wind current. But then things got stranger. My digital watch jumped back 2 minutes. My phone showed no service, though I'd had a signal earlier. I tucked it away, a silent talisman against the growing unease. Then something moved in the lake's center. At first I thought it was a bird, a bright smear against the darkness. But it wasn't a bird at all. I was out on the lake where I'd fished countless times before. The water was smooth, moonlight painting everything, silver. Then I saw it, something moving across the surface in a way I'd never witnessed. No sound, no splash. Just a precise, silent glide, like a marble sliding across glass. It was moving fast, then slowing, then crossing an old marker buoy. That's when something strange happened. For a brief moment, it was a perfect silver sphere, small and bright. Then it flattened, like a coin tossed across a table. But this wasn't a normal movement. It didn't ripple the water. Instead, it bent the light itself. When that happened, the stars behind it shifted slightly, as if someone had nudged the entire night sky. I knew this lake. I'd spent most of my life fishing here, seen every kind of shadow and movement on the water. Logs, boats, reflections, nothing was new to me. But this was different, silent, precise. Moving without seeming to touch anything. My hands started shaking so badly I couldn't have used the camcorder, even if I'd wanted to. The object, whatever it was, circled about 50 yards from me, moving in an unusual pattern like someone drawing with a bent ruler. A hint of metallic shine caught the moonlight, like polished chrome reflecting. The soundless motion made the lake feel impossibly vast and fragile. Then, suddenly, it was gone. Not flying away, not with any dramatic exit, just absent. 1 second a silver line traced across the water, the next nothing. The surface read smooth as a blank page. Frogs resumed their chorus as if nothing had happened. I sat in my boat, rod in hand, arms cramping, waiting for some sign, some explanation. As dawn approached, I returned to the cabin, adrenaline still humming through me. The boards creaked as I tied up, and Abby the dog barked her usual complaint. I tried telling Mary, the lake's owner and my friend, but the words stuck in my throat. Something about what I'd seen felt too incredible, too unreal to describe. But I said it anyway. She was practical in a way that made you feel ridiculous for worrying. When I got to her porch, she said, "A silver ball. At this hour, you sure you weren't dreaming?" I was awake, I said. I had my rod out. I was watching. She chewed the inside of a cheek, sizing me up. "Maybe a seal or something keeps coming in at night," she suggested, then smiled in a way that let me know she didn't believe it. "You old fools, and your stories." I didn't go out that afternoon. I told myself I'd been spooked by too many late nights, that the brain was a trickster. But curiosity doesn't like to be snuffed by logic. So 2 nights later, I went back out with the camcorder and a thermometer. And the thing I've always had, stubbornness. I sat in the same spot, the same light, watching the middle of the lake like a blind man might watch for the sound of a door. Oddities began to pile up. The pressure on my ears dropped twice, like we were in a plane for a second and then back. My watch slipped time like it had been nudged. When my hand brushed the metal of the rod, it felt slightly warm, not like it should in the cool night. Wood smoke from a distant house curled across the far shore, smelling of someone grilling too late. The water hummed in a way I couldn't place. At 11:48, the camcorder's LED flashed a battery icon. I swapped batteries, annoyed. Later, when I rewound the footage, I swore. A 30-second block was missing. The tape had a gap like it had been cut. The camcorder didn't look tampered with. The casing was intact. The tape showed an image of the lake, and then a jump, like someone erased a sentence from a paragraph. A week passed with nothing. I told less and less to Mary, because her laugh had a way of stretching the thing smaller until it felt like an imagination failing. Around the same time, I noticed a black older sedan parked at the edge of the road by the end, tree-lined most mornings. No one visible. It was always there, at dawn and gone by noon, like it kept its hours. I photographed it once, and the picture came out grainy as if taken through a filter. Then, 2 nights after that, around 2:30 a.m., I saw it again. The sphere came from the direction of the inlet and skimmed like before, closer this time. When it passed near the dock, the water around the pilings flashed like someone had triggered something. I reached out and my hand passed through the air where something had been, feeling colder than it should. The mercury seemed to have vanished. Abby remained asleep on the porch, not even twitching. She hadn't barked at all. Morning came with overcooked bacon. I drove into town, 2 beers in the truck, looking to talk. The hardware store's regular nodded along as I spoke. When I mentioned strange things, he'd nod and share stories about wind tunnels and oil slick glints. The sheriff just smiled, asking about the old sedan and any suspicious activity. I described the light and my missing footage, trying not to sound like I was spinning a tall tale. "You keep telling yourself you're safe," he said, handing me a coffee. "Maybe that's all you need for now." I left with nothing. 3 days later, they arrived. I saw them before hearing the truck. 2 men sitting on my porch swing when I pulled in late after working extra hours at the plant. The porch light was off. They wore black suits, clean and unwrinkled, with an unsettling stillness. One had a thin face, the kind of nose that suggested he measured words carefully before speaking. The other, with a wide jaw, sat slightly back, shoulders set. Not young, not old. They looked cut from the same grey cloth. My first instinct was to back up and leave. The second was to act normal, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of scaring me. That resolve lasted 6 steps. Walking to the porch, my boots made a hollow, returning sound. "Evening," the thin-faced man said, voice flat and polite. "Mr. Kareb's flat and polite." "Cole," I responded, my voice betraying a man holding on to composure by a thread. They asked to sit, speaking without hurry or small talk, as if everything was predetermined and they were merely fulfilling a plan. I wanted to tell them to leave, to ask how they found my address, to explain about the silver thing and the missing tape. But something stopped me. 2 men sat near me at the edge of the lake, their presence measured and calculated. They watched me intently, studying every detail like medical professionals tracking symptoms. Their leather shoes were pristine, without a single mark of outdoor wear. The thin-faced man spoke first, his tone deliberate. "You fish at night a lot," he stated. I confirmed briefly. The wide-jawed man suggested I stick to daytime fishing, his words delivered as if they were a gentle warning. Their smiles were carefully constructed, each expression chosen with precision. "There are elements that are more active at night," the thin man explained. "It's safer to be out in daylight." My response felt awkward, hanging between agreement and confusion. Questions bubbled beneath my surface. Who were they? What agency sent them? Why they felt compelled to offer advice like a casual neighborhood warning. Then the thin man produced a small silver card, sliding it across to me. An unfamiliar emblem, a reference code, nothing I recognized. "We're researchers," the wide man said. "Field sampling." He leaned forward, attempting to appear reassuring. "Public safety," he added, the words carrying weight. They were careful to present themselves as official yet approachable, more guidance than threat. "If there's something out there bothering you, tell us," the thin man continued. "We can help document it. There's no need to be in harm's way." I mentioned a silver thing on the water, my sentence trailing off abruptly. They nodded, the kind of men who processed information without needing written notes. The wide man reached into his pocket, and I instinctively flinched. A pamphlet emerged instead, plain paper, a nocturnal safety advisory urging avoidance of nighttime water activities. "You sure you'll be all right going forward?" the thin man asked, his tone casual, like a neighbor inquiring about home repairs. Their entire interaction felt choreographed, a performance of concerned community service. I asked the men if they worked for the county and about their IDs. They identified themselves as part of a regional unit, offering to provide contact information through official channels if I requested. Their manner suggested they'd move if I asked, but they stayed for 20 minutes. Their questions were oddly mundane. They inquired about my boat, my routine, the bait I used. They asked about Abby and whether I kept a light on the dock. Something about their questioning made me want to answer with precise, log-like details, dates, times, numbers. They took notes on a small pad, writing without seeming bothered by the act of handwriting. When they left, they stood at the edge of the gravel lane, watching the tree line until I could no longer see them. After their departure, I checked everything carefully, my camcorder, the tape, my watch, the little items on my tackle shelf. The missing block on the tape hadn't returned. More peculiarly, my spare reel of fishing line, previously full, now seemed slightly less full, as if someone had unwound a length to examine the filament before winding it back. Days passed. The black sedan stopped appearing on the road. The hardware store man began smiling at me again. Mary's attitude shifted. Instead of laughing, she started offering coffee more frequently, like she was attempting a different approach to kindness. I ventured out during daylight hours. The lake seemed normal. Fewer ripples, fewer strange pressure drops. It behaved like an ordinary lake. I kept telling myself various things. I was done with nighttime water ventures. I had been lucky. The men had helped somehow. A person could be careful and be fine. I carried their card in my wallet, not to call, but because it felt like keeping a doctor's contact information you hope never to use. The camcorder remained in the top drawer for months. Occasionally, I'd take it out, press play, and watch the footage until my patience wore thin. The missing frames made me feel like someone was editing my life. Long after their visit while on the porch, I once saw a brief glint on the water, a sliver like a tilting coin, which brought back memories of that night. The dog stared at the distant shore, then returned to sleep. I laughed quietly, remembering the wide man's advice about sticking to daylight. I never saw the silver thing again. I never received a call from anyone. Life settled back into its slow routine with familiar small dramas. A fence needing mending. A generator that wouldn't start. A neighbor's kid bringing over a raccoon saved from a trap. The men in black became a story to tell when wanting to sound worldly. Sometimes when I launched the boat at midday, with the breeze just right and the lake running like a polished plate, I let the rod hang loose and watched the horizon. I wonder if it was a charm, a trick of the light, an animal doing something graceful. Other times I think about how it bent the stars for a heartbeat and how the men slid the cart across, knowing the rules but keeping the noise down. It felt like a warning and a favor simultaneously, the two of them on my porch swing telling me to fish in the daylight, like a neighbor suggesting I wear a jacket. I do what they asked. I leave the night for the owls and the singing coyote. I go out when the sun is up, when the lake is loud with dragonflies and vibrant life. Some nights I still wake at 2 and listen, half expecting the water to clear its throat. I stand at the window, watching the dark and the line of birches that stops the view. I tell myself I'm safe inside with the lights on. I keep the card in my wallet because there are things a man keeps not out of trust, but to remember who told him to be careful. We left the trailhead at 4:30 in the afternoon. 3 of us, me, Jenna and Mark. Loaded light because it was supposed to be a quick overnight to the ridge above Cold Water Hollow. The forecast promised calm weather and a clear night, with a thin fog in the valley that would melt by mid-morning. I'd done the route years back when my knees were younger and I wasn't working the late shift at the bakery. We wanted the valley view at dusk and the Milky Way after dark. Nothing fancy. I brought a small DSLR to pretend I know what I'm doing. Jenna had a phone with a decent camera, and Mark carried the headlamp that never died. Also, he bragged, up on the switchbacks, the trails smelled like crushed pine and dust. We joked and chatted. We reached our campsite on a flat rock as the sky bled out, setting up the small stove while the sun turned gold and the incoming moon cast silver light. The forest around us was alive with our chatter, Mark telling stories about his cousin chased by raccoons, us trading push-ups to feel like teenagers. Near the second saddle, the valley opened beneath us, with fog sitting low like a pressed blanket. Something felt different, but not in a way we could immediately name. The usual sounds were muted, as if someone had turned down the bass on the world's background noise. Jenna noticed it too, her voice quiet, because talking about small weather changes is what you do when you want to be sure you're not imagining them. We watched the last of the sun smear across the eastern boulder, eating and setting up camp with headlamps off. I always liked letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. The valley was a soft wash at our feet. Around 9, when the last bright strip of sunset faded, the fog began to change. At first we thought they were hiker lights down in the hollow, but these were too steady. Nodes of light rising and lowering like breath, splitting and joining like schools of fish. Jenna zoomed in with her phone, catching a dozen tiny white pinpricks moving slowly beneath the fog. The lights moved with strange precision. They would skim close to the tree line, drift toward the middle, then circle back in perfect small arcs. No sound accompanied their movement. Sometimes they'd slow almost to hovering, and when they did, a darker patch would pass beneath them, as if the light was cutting through the air itself. Mark clicked his headlamp low, then off. Maybe some hunter with a drone, he suggested. But we all knew it was something else entirely. We'd been listening all evening, but nothing moved. No drones, no mechanical hum. The lights drifted like small glass shells. I set up my DSLR on a tripod, framing a long exposure over the valley. My goal was to capture satellite streaks, plain paths, and the smear of headlight lines. A river of light across the fog. As I clicked the shutter, the screen's faint glow revealed strange occurrences. My cheap digital watch blinked the wrong time momentarily. Jenna's compass app spun wildly before settling. Mark's headlamp flickered from orange to white, as if controlled by an unseen switch. We laughed nervously, joking about electrostatic interference to mask our unease. The lights began to move differently, braiding together like threads. One skimmed low over the fog and sank, but not like a typical lantern. The fog dimmed in a perfect 6-foot ring, as if an invisible hand had pressed into its surface. A bubble of emptiness hung suspended, then drifted. When I tried to photograph the ring, my camera's live view stuttered. The preview looked normal, but the ring was absent. Jenna's phone recorded a brief snippet before her app declared the file corrupt. We exchanged knowing glances, understanding how the woods can sharpen your awareness of sensory limits. Driven by an irresistible curiosity, we hiked down the ridge. Loose gravel crunched beneath our feet as the fog rose like a curtain. The lights moved with increasing purpose, slipping behind trees and darting across the field in jagged, deliberate lines. Then we saw it. In the shallow spaces where the lights passed, the fog formed a column resembling smoke, but not from any fire we knew. A person-shaped detail emerged, sending a chill through our group. The fog gathered like a veil, turning 2 columns into ghostly limbs. We weren't seeing full figures or even clear shapes, just suggestions. Jenna broke the silence with a whisper. "Do you think anyone's down there? People!" Her voice was soft, as if afraid the valley might hear. We crept lower, reaching the tree line and scanning the meadow. No hikers, no truck lights. Instead, strange lights moved at the far end of the hollow, tracing intricate patterns like someone practicing with invisible rope. Their movement was deliberate and measured. Unlike an airplane's quick passage, 2 of the brightest lights rose, hovering just above the ground. They slid together, creating a ripple in the fog that momentarily gleamed with an almost metallic sharpness, catching moonlight in an unnatural way. My skin tingled. I set up the tripod and took a photo, the shutter clicking normally, but something was wrong. When I reviewed the image, only star trails remained. The lights we'd witnessed so clearly were completely absent, as if the camera had stripped away everything but the most fundamental elements of the landscape. Small details began to accumulate, building a sense of unease. A deer paused, then walked away with purposeful steps. A distant farm dog howled, marking time. A woodpecker suddenly stopped mid-beat, leaving an unnatural silence. The stars watched cold and bright. We hiked back in single file, heads down. The valley lights continued their slow, deliberate movement, seeming to exist in a different temporal plane. At camp, I packed my camera more from exhaustion than any conscious intent. Over tea, we debated whether to stay the night. Mark was eager, Jenna resistant, and I wavered between their positions. As we often do in mountains, we took turns keeping watch, one lighter, one listening. I lay awake, the valley's presence lingering just beyond our perception. Night had settled over the valley, and the smallest sounds seemed magnified. Beetles skittered. Twigs moved occasionally. My mind wandered to small mechanical details, and my eyelids felt paper-thin. Around 2 in the morning, Jenna touched my shoulder and pointed downward. Something strange was happening. Lights moved in a deliberate pattern, cutting a perfectly straight line through the fog before stopping at a lone tree. One light hovered motionless at the tree's base. Then everything changed. A profound silence pressed through the air. Crickets stopped their chirping. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jenna's soft laugh broke the tension, the kind of laugh that keeps you from falling apart. "That's not normal," she whispered. We decided to leave, but not in a panicked rush. Our movements were measured, calm, like people carefully stepping away from something fragile and inexplicable. At the trailhead, a metal sign with regulations stood near a long gravel parking lot. The gravel crunched under my boots, and the night air tasted like cold iron. Halfway down the main road, a black sedan pulled up and stopped. It was immaculate, looking freshly polished. 2 men in black emerged. Silent, precise, deliberate. One was tall and thin with a sharp nose. The other was shorter, broader. Both wore sunglasses, despite the bright moonlight. They approached us, hands always positioned in front of them. The thin man smiled without warmth. "Evening. Any good photos?" His question hung in the air like a neutral object. Jenna went pale, Mark mumbled about seeing lights. The men's expressions remained unchanged. "We mean, did you capture any photographs for records?" The word records carried an unspoken weight. The shorter man held a small card, unrevealed until the moment felt right. He slid something across my hand, not offering but placing, an emblem and a few letters I didn't recognize. "If you have images," he said, "we can archive them for further study." My mind raced to corrupt files, missing frames, the ring absent from my tripod shot. My mouth went dry. We took some stuff," I stammered. "Some didn't save." I held up my phone like a thin shield. "Want to see?" They nodded with a practiced patience, as if this was routine. We settled on a metal bench by the lot, and I passed Jenna's phone over. Hers had the better clip. The men examined it clinically, more administrative than curious. A tap, a silent nod. Their questions came methodical and calm. How long were we on the ridge? How long did we watch the lights? Did we see anything else? Their pencil traced notes on a small pad. They inquired whether any of us belonged to local hiking groups or had contributed photos to regional nature archives. "Calibration," the tall one said, as if that explained everything, more concerned with how we positioned our cameras than the lights themselves. I remembered the compass app spinning wildly, my cheap watch blinking incorrectly. They identified themselves as part of a regional observation unit, documenting anomalies. Their advice came wrapped in a tone of neighborly concern. Stay on well-traveled trails. Avoid the valley after dark. Not a command, but a suggestion cloaked in public safety. Stick to daytime hikes for a bit, the shorter one added casually. It felt like a limit disguised as friendly advice. Suddenly, my planned Twilight Ridge routes felt almost like a violation. They were polite. Precise. The kind of officials you couldn't easily challenge. No badge, no clear office. Just a small card and a phone number that, when dialed, connected to a receptionist who confirmed a unit's existence but nothing more. They drove away without ceremony, leaving behind a lingering sense of undefined restriction. Black paint dissolving into darkness. Something felt different that week. My camera's long exposure shots came out strange, perfect star trails punctured by blank segments, as if someone had sliced pieces from the film. Jenna's phone videos glitched constantly. Mark kept mentioning a black sedan parked on the road, hoodies low, positioned just close enough to feel deliberate. Our stories met mixed reactions among friends. Some listened sympathetically, others laughed. A few suggested we'd been hallucinating from too much mountain air. Life continued its rhythm. I perfected my bakery timing, pulling loaves from the oven just as the shop opened. Jenna returned to her graduate seminars. Mark spoke about rivers and driftwood. Night hikes became a forgotten activity. Occasionally, I considered reaching out, wanting names, agency information, even a business card leading to an identifiable office. But something about their visit suggested a strange, unspoken etiquette. Pushing too hard felt almost discourteous, disrupting the thin veneer of civility they'd presented. Months later, an online outdoor forum thread caught my attention. Another person had documented similar experiences. Their photographs echoed our own long exposure streaks, interrupted by inexplicable blanks. Comments ranged from technical analysis to casual jokes. Several users mentioned the Regional Observation Unit requesting their image files. Some reported their images appearing normal until after this request, when small gaps mysteriously emerged. Theories proliferated. Satellite interference, cosmic radiation, faulty electronics. Yet these explanations felt like hastily sewn patches, concealing larger uncertainties. I still visit the ridge during daylight. Sunrise transforms the valley, fog burning away, as if nothing extraordinary occurred. Wild flowers dot the meadow. Deer move through grey shadows. A woodpecker's rhythmic hammering breaks the silence. My camera remains packed, long exposures left to others. Nighttime brings familiar routines. Windows cracked open, phone checked before sleeping, a habit of cautious anticipation. Sometimes I find myself gazing down the trail toward the hollow, half expecting two silent figures to materialize on a distant porch swing, subtly reinforcing unspoken boundaries. No definitive answers exist, only memories remain. Lights with peculiar shapes, fog bending like an invisible hand, and that casual, unsettling question hanging in the air. The hunt was my usual Thursday evening routine, trudging along the ridge behind the old Thompson property in northern Vermont. My rifle hung over my shoulder, and I carried a pack with extra lenses and my old camera for wildlife shots. Something I don't typically do, but I had a feeling. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no squirrels, just the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. This silence felt different, as if the woods were holding their breath. Just before dusk, the landscape always grows still, but this was something else. Following a deer trail, I descended toward a small clearing I knew well. The path opened to a low valley where grass typically stands tall and green, often kissed by frost. When I stepped into the clearing, something stopped me cold. The grass wasn't simply flattened. It was burned, not randomly, but with an unsettling precision, almost as if someone had meticulously ironed it into perfect concentric rings. 3 rings, each about 6 feet wide, leading to a central patch, scorched down to bare dirt. A faint metallic smell hung in the air, the kind that comes from intense heat. Slowly, I pulled out my camera to document the scene. Low mist softened the tree edges, making the clearing look dreamlike and unreal. Crouching at the outer ring, I tried to frame the perfect shot when movement caught my eye. 2 men emerged from the opposite tree line. They wore plain black suits, ties, and shoes, moving with an unnaturally smooth grace. At the trail's edge, they approached with white cards, asking about photos, as if this small, neutral exchange could maintain some sense of order. We kept walking that night, the 3 of us, beneath the moon through the valley, with lights cutting their arcs. Later, men in tidy suits would inquire about images, like librarians seeking specific volumes. We went home. The hollow remained unchanged. The lights, for now, kept their own time. The clearing was dense with fog, muffling every sound. 2 men stood with an eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. Their movements were calculated, precise, almost mechanical. Clean-shaven and expressionless, one spoke in a flat tone, even. "You shouldn't be here. This is private property." My camera hung suspended between us. I stammered a response about hunting, trying to sound casual. But these weren't normal people. They moved like synchronized machines, without the natural breathing or subtle expressions humans typically display. I nodded quickly, lowering my camera. "Sorry, I'll leave." The first man pointed at my device. "You shouldn't have photographed this. Some things are controlled." A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't even heard them approach through the thick fog. They seemed to materialize from the mist itself, standing just at the clearing's edge. My legs felt frozen, every instinct screaming to run. "Export controls?" the taller one asked. I laughed nervously, explaining it was just a camera. They stepped closer, moving in perfect synchronization. The mist swirled around their feet like ghostly tendrils. Panic rising, I started backing toward the tree limb. They didn't follow, just watched with those blank, unreadable expressions. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they melted back into the fog between the trees, silent, shadow-like. I ran. My truck was parked near the river access, and my hands shook so badly I could barely unlock it. Looking back, the ridge was empty, just pine trees and curling mist, as if nothing had ever happened. That week was strange. Sleep was impossible. Every time I glanced at my camera, a wave of dread washed over me. Then on Tuesday morning, walking into the electronics shop I manage in Stowe, I froze. 2 men in black stood waiting. Identical suits, identical blank faces, identical mechanical movements. I was at the coffee shop, half-finished cup in hand, when they approached. 2 men who clearly weren't customers. The taller one asked if I had a moment, and I wordlessly led them to the side office. Export controls, the shorter one said, his gaze drifting to my camera repair corner. My throat went dry. They wanted to know about my drone flight. I felt the weight of their statement. This wasn't a casual conversation. I admitted I'd flown the drone near the ridge a few days earlier. Just a hobby drone, I insisted. Nothing special. They nodded, as if my explanation was exactly what they expected. Then came their demand: delete all the footage. Immediately, I hesitated. The SD card was at home. They didn't raise their voices or show anger, but their message was crystal clear. I would delete the footage tonight. I would tell no one. And they left, sliding out the door without another word. That evening, I sat on my couch, the SD card in my hand. Something felt off. I eventually backed it up to my laptop, but couldn't bring myself to watch it right away. Fear mingled with curiosity. When I finally opened the files, the initial footage looked normal. Trees from above, a winding river, fog drifting like smoke. Then I saw a dark shape hovering motionless above the ridge. No rotors, no sound. Wind whipped around, bending trees, but this shape remained perfectly still. Zooming in, I saw something vaguely geometric and metallic, without clear edges or features. Suddenly, 2 figures stepped into the clearing. Black suits, black hair, blank expressions. They didn't move or signal. Just watched. The shadow above them shifted almost imperceptibly. The figures turned and vanished into the trees as quickly as they'd appeared. I closed the laptop and sat in stunned silence, questions swirling in my mind. The back roads wind through the evening, and sometimes I catch a glimpse of something dark hovering just beyond the trees, motionless, waiting. Motionless, waiting. I have a drone and a memory I can't shake. It happened on a grey, windy Thursday in Ashland, Oregon. Behind my apartment complex, I'd been filming the river bend, doing slow pans over water and treetops. Nothing unusual, just another routine flight. The sky looked like steel wool, trees groaning in the wind. I knew how to handle my drone. I'd been flying for years in quiet spots like this. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a crow, but something was off. It wasn't moving, not up, down or sideways, just hanging in the air completely still. Massive wind gusts were jostling branches and making my drone struggle to stay steady. But this thing, absolutely motionless. A dark shape, almost blending into the clouds. A faint metallic shimmer along its edges caught what little sunlight remained. I tried circling with the drone, getting a better view. Then, suddenly, gone. No sound, no movement. Nothing where I expected something to land. My controller beeped, low battery. I brought the drone back, landed it, walked to the clearing's edge. Nothing there, just circles in the grass that looked too precise to be natural. I haven't told anyone. I still don't know what I recorded or who those men in black were who seemed to know more than I ever could. But I keep the footage. I keep the memory of that cold, quiet fog that swallowed everything. And sometimes, late at night, I can still smell that faint metallic tang in the air. I haven't flown near that ridge again. Some things you just don't. Monday at the small electronics shop where I worked fixing and selling drones and cameras seemed like a normal day until 2 men walked in. Dark suits, black shoes, their pressed clothes screaming important while simultaneously warning you not to ask questions. They made a direct line to the counter where I was testing a drone battery. Without any introduction, one of them spoke about export controls. His partner stood silently, arms crossed, watching me with an unreadable intensity. "Does this drone have export controls?" he asked. gesturing vaguely across the display. My response came out tighter than I expected. Just a consumer drone. Nothing special. They exchanged a look that told me nothing, yet seemed to communicate everything. The first man pulled out a small notebook, wrote something, tore the page, and handed it to me. Check the serial numbers. Report any irregularities to us? I was bewildered. Report to who exactly? They didn't answer, just nodded and walked out like they owned the street. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't from morning caffeine. Earlier that week, something had caught my attention in the woods, a strange, hovering shape among the trees. No footprints, no branch disturbances. Just something. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of light. Now these mysterious men and their cryptic instructions about my hobby drone made everything feel connected. That evening I returned to the clearing, drone in hand, hoping to prove to myself it was nothing more than a weird bird or a distant plane reflection. The wind was stronger. As I filmed the tree line, making slow, wide passes, I saw it again. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I didn't catch it right away. A slight bend in the light across the forest canopy drew my attention. Suddenly, the shape crystallized. A dark form hovering about 50 feet above the tree line, perfectly motionless despite fierce wind gusts buffeting my drone. I inched closer, staying low behind a small ridge. Silence surrounded me. No mechanical sounds, no humming, just wind rustling through branches, and that impossible stillness hovering overhead. For 10 minutes, I watched intently, zooming in on my controller screen. No wings, no visible propellers, just a matte dark shape that seemed to defy explanation. The reflection caught my eye again, not a metallic glint, but something more like a mirror capturing grey clouds in an inexplicable way, almost blending with the sky itself. A panicked thought struck me. What if it notices me? Why does it feel like it already has? Cold chills ran down my spine, and I nearly dropped my controller. Quickly, I brought the drone down and packed it away, suddenly eager to leave. The next day, men in black suits arrived with their usual stark intensity. Serial numbers, one said, notebook extended. I couldn't help myself. I don't know what you want. I was just flying in the woods. Nothing classified. He stared at me silently, then wrote something, tore off the page and handed it to me. Make sure you keep your footage. I blinked. Keep my footage. Safe. Always make copies. They left as abruptly as they'd arrived. No threats, no explanations. Back home, I reviewed the footage on my laptop. Most looked ordinary, trees swaying, clouds drifting, but in a few tiny, almost imperceptible frames, something appeared. A dark blot above the trees, reflecting light in impossible ways, moving fractionally as if aware of the camera. Each time I paused, the shape seemed to shift, unbound by the frame's constraints. I've returned to that clearing several times since. The wind, trees, and river remain unchanged. The shape hasn't reappeared. Yet I can't stop thinking about those men, how they knew about my drone, how invested they were in my footage. Now I'm meticulous, double-checking batteries, South Dakota cards, everything. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder. Some nights, I still analyze that footage carefully. There's something unsettling in the reflection of those trees against the grey sky, a dark shape that might not actually exist. The details remain unclear to me. What I know is that whatever I captured was significant enough for someone to visit me twice, ensuring I kept the recording. Their motivation remains a complete mystery. It happened on a late-night drive along Route 97, north of Lake Cologne. The conditions were perfect. A bright moon hung high in a clear sky, and the road stretched empty before me. My car's engine seemed louder than usual in the crisp, still air. I had just passed a small resort town's turnoff, drifting into that half-conscious state of highway driving. The lake caught my attention differently that night. Normally, it was just another unremarkable body of water, but something compelled me to look. Suddenly, it was glowing. A single circular light emerged from the surface, rising in a way I'd never seen before. Not like a splash or a boat, but something entirely different. It shot upward faster than any aircraft, absolutely silent, leaving no trace behind. I slammed the brakes, my car fishtailing slightly. My heart raced so intensely I could hear it over the engine's rumble. The light ascended maybe 100 or 200 feet, then simply vanished. Gone. I sat frozen for several seconds before realizing I needed to keep moving. My hands trembled as I returned to the road. I'd heard countless local stories about strange lake phenomena, mysterious disappearances, whispered rumors, but I'd never witnessed anything that challenged my perception of reality quite like this. At the gas station, I tried rationalizing what I'd seen. Perhaps a reflection, a boy with an unusual light, something mundane. Two men stood by the neighboring pump, dressed identically in black suits and ties. Their clothing looked stiff and cheap, like costume pieces from an old espionage film. One kept his hands in his pockets while the other stared directly at me as I walked past. They seemed completely out of place, almost staged. I didn't think much of it at first. Gas stations attract all kinds of weird folks late at night. But when the guy started talking, something felt different. "Did you see it?" His voice was flat, almost robotic. No emotion, just a direct question. My heart started racing as I asked, "What?" He responded, "The reflection from the lake." I froze. The other man waited silently, watching me. Through the station windows, the lake looked calm and dark as ever. "Yeah, I saw something," I mumbled. "I'm not really sure what it was." They just nodded slowly. "Careful what you say. Not everyone understands," the first man added. I felt stupid. I hurried to fill my tank, trying not to stare at these two grown men in black suits standing by the pumps in the middle of the night, asking about some glowing light over the lake. When I turned back, they had vanished. The pumps were empty. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. No sign of how they left or where they went. It was like they simply dissolved into the night. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. For a mile or two, something black seemed to move in the shadows near the tree line, but each time I looked directly, it disappeared. I told myself I was just imagining things, that the adrenaline was making my brain play tricks. At work the next day, I tried to forget about it. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend Mike. I didn't want to sound crazy. But every time I thought about the glowing object or those mysterious men, a strange pressure lingered in the air. A week later, I asked my younger brother Alex if he'd seen anything weird over the lake. He hesitated. "I saw a light a few nights ago," he said. "Went straight up. No sound. I figured it was fireworks or something." We exchanged an uneasy look. A month passed. Nothing happened. I started believing I'd imagined the entire encounter. Then one night, driving that same stretch of Route 97, the lake dark and still, I saw something again. I gripped the wheels so tight my knuckles whitened, not looking back after seeing a faint glow moving slowly under the water before it vanished. A few miles down the road, I stopped at another gas station trying to calm myself. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were alive, and I kept checking the windows. Two men in black stood by the pumps. They weren't waving or smiling, just waiting. Something made me walk up despite feeling like the ground itself was resisting me. My chest felt tight, my legs heavy. The man who'd been silent the night I saw the glowing object spoke first. "Did you see it tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. I think so. Something in the lake." He nodded. The other man's response was direct. "Keep it to yourself." His tone was calm, almost casual, a warning without anger. I nodded, fumbling with my wallet. My hands shook so badly I dropped a few coins. They waited silently. When I turned to leave and glanced back, they were gone. I couldn't explain how they disappeared so quickly. Over the next few months, I drove by the lake at night, watching carefully. Sometimes I'd catch a flicker, a faint reflection movement in the water. Sometimes nothing. Each time, I half expected to see them in their black suits, waiting. I never saw them again at the gas stations. But the memory lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Were they just people? Something else entirely? I tried telling myself it was a trick of light, an overactive imagination, maybe a drone prank. Yet the quiet pressure in the air, their knowing gaze, the way they seemed to understand I'd seen something, that feeling never really went away. And sometimes, driving past the lake after dark, I could swear someone was watching from the shadows, waiting. The dirt road along Eagle Ridge's eastern edge was quiet that evening in mid-June. Marcus, Laya, and I were walking home as the day's heat lingered, and the distant mountains stretched like dark blue shadows across the horizon. We were laughing about something meaningless when Ila suddenly pointed upward. What I first thought was a small training plane moved in a way no aircraft could. It darted between ridges, zipped behind mountain peaks, and then shot straight up into the sky, vanishing in an instant. Marcus whispered, Did you see that? We stood frozen, watching the still bright landscape, the road winding around mountain bases, the trees, the peaks. But the object didn't return. No sound broke the silence. No motor, no jet engine. Just emptiness. Our walk home was uncomfortably silent. Each of us tried to act normal, but we were clearly shaken. I kept trying to rationalize what I'd seen, telling myself it was just a drone or an unusual plane. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The next day at school, something felt off immediately. In the guidance counselor's office, two older men in black suits sat waiting. They were bald or had hair so slicked back it looked artificial. Definitely not regular staff. Not regular staff. Mrs. the Tesla, Mayan descent. Hal Brooke was nowhere to be seen. The men called students in individually. Sitting among the other kids, I watched them return looking strange, eyes wide, faces pale, muttering cryptic phrases like, "Just answer questions, okay." They didn't seem upset, but an odd tension hung in the air. When my turn came, one man gestured for me to sit. "Have you noticed anything unusual recently?" he asked in a precise, scripted tone. When I hesitated, he elaborated, "Disturbances in the sky. Unusual sounds, lights, movements outside, normal aircraft behavior." My mind raced. Was he asking about that night? I tried to sound casual. Yeah, maybe. The next few days were strange. After reporting what I'd seen over the mountains, two men questioned me in an office, scribbling notes as I described a fast, darting light with no sound, disappearing into the sky. My hands were sweaty, but I kept my voice steady. People around me seemed normal, but I kept catching glimpses of dark-suited men lingering at the edges of parking lots and behind the football field. Every time I looked, they'd vanish. Then the humming began. Late at night, a low pulsating sound filled my bedroom. It wasn't loud, but constant, with a vibration that lightly shook the windows. I thought it might be the heater or a transformer, but something felt different. When I called Leia the next morning, she confirmed hearing the same thing. Marcus hadn't noticed anything. I tried recording the sound on my phone. The audio was weird, a constant low thrum with an odd skipping sensation, like the sound flickered for a fraction of a second every few moments. Listening to the recording made my chest feel tight. A few nights later, an unexpected knock came at the door. My parents were asleep, and I hadn't mentioned the humming to anyone. I opened it to find two bald men in black suits and sunglasses. Even though it was dark outside. "Evening," one said in a calm, neutral voice. The other asked directly, "Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" I was stunned. "How do you know?" They didn't answer, just stepped closer. The room felt pressurized, as if it couldn't contain their presence. "Tell us everything," the first man instructed. I stumbled through my account. The nights I'd recorded the hum, Leia hearing it, the light in the mountains. They listened silently, occasionally writing notes. I left feeling a strange, heavy awareness. Something was watching just beneath the surface of normal life. I live in a small, older house on the edge of town in northern Wisconsin, surrounded by dense pine woods. Late July nights are sticky and warm, windows cracked open to let some air in. That night I was already up late, sitting at the kitchen table with a half-empty coffee cup after a long week at the plant, unable to shake a restless feeling. Then it started. Faint at first, like the distant vibration of an idling engine, but something felt different. A steady, low hum that seemed to swell and shrink, almost breathing. My windows rattled lightly with each pulse. I walked over and pressed my hand against the glass. The vibrations went right through me. Outside on the back porch, I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. No sound beyond the strange humming that now seemed to wrap around me. Weeks later, after intense questioning by two men who appeared unexpectedly, I realized something significant about those moments. They came, took notes, and left with cryptic instructions. "Keep this to yourself," the first man said. "Don't discuss it with anyone else." The door clicked shut behind them, leaving me staring at a blank hallway. The humming weakened over the next week, then vanished completely. When I reviewed my recordings, I noticed something peculiar. For the last few seconds of every clip, the sound disappeared. The audio would warp slightly, as if something invisible had brushed past the microphone. Weeks later, I saw them again at the grocery store. Black clothes, sunglasses, standing casually by the vegetable section, watching. When I looked away and back, They were gone. School returned to normal. Friends joked about nothing. But I started noticing the mountains more often. At dusk, I'd catch a figure darting between the ridges. Too fast for a plane, too precise to be birds. I watched silently, never telling anyone. Sometimes, lying in bed at night, I think about those knocks, the questions, the notes they took. I wonder if they ever came for Laia or Marcus, or if I was their only target. I've never heard from them again, but every now and then, when the air is still and the mountains are dark against the sky, I swear I hear it. The low hum, faint, pulsating like the world is holding its breath. And I know I'll hear it again, even if no one else ever does. Here's the rewritten version. Nothing was moving outside. The familiar neighborhood had gone completely silent. No animals, not even the usual nighttime rustling. A strange hum hung in the air, its source impossible to pinpoint. It seemed to vibrate through the atmosphere itself. I grabbed my phone, thinking Kevin, my audio equipment expert friend, might help me understand what was happening. I set the phone on the railing and recorded for about 3 minutes. Without warning, the sound vanished. Absolute silence. Immediately, I played back the recording. The pulsing vibration was there, faint but unmistakable. I listened repeatedly, trying to make sense of it. Underground construction, a transformer malfunction, nothing nearby matched this sound. The next morning I asked Harold, my older neighbor, if he'd heard anything unusual. He hadn't. Even at the factory where he worked, no one mentioned anything out of the ordinary from the previous night. Around 9 that evening, while washing dishes, someone knocked at my door. It was late, so I hesitated before answering. 2 men stood there, tall, impeccably dressed in black suits, crisp white shirts, and polished shoes. They looked like they'd stepped straight from a professional photo shoot. Evening, the first man said, "We're checking with residents in the area. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" The phrasing struck me as odd. Not, "Did you hear something strange?" but audio disturbances. When I asked about their organization, he replied, "Federal Survey Group. We're documenting unusual occurrences." I mentioned the previous night's hum, carefully avoiding any reference to my recording. Both men nodded, as if this was precisely the information they sought. The second man remained silent, holding a notebook but making no notes. "Did you record it?" The first man asked. I was stunned. How did they know? I denied it. They exchanged an unreadable glance. "If it happens again," the first man instructed, "please do not attempt to capture it. Just make a note of the time." Then, without another word, they walked away in perfect synchronization, disappearing into the pine tree shadows. No car. No further explanation. Just gone. A week ago, 2 men appeared at my doorstep, and the encounter was brief but deeply unsettling. Those 3 minutes changed everything. I hadn't told a soul about the recording, yet somehow they knew. That night, sleep was impossible. Every sound became a potential threat. Car engines in the distance, creaks in the house, each noise made me tense. I kept watching the windows, expecting to see someone watching back, but there was nothing. The next day, I tried to play the recording. Gone. The file remained listed on my phone with a 2:03 a.m. timestamp, but when I tapped it, the player claimed, "File cannot be opened." I tried my laptop. Same result. The file existed but was empty. I haven't heard the hum again, but those men haunt my thoughts. Late at night, I glimpsed 2 figures moving slowly at the edge of the woods, silent and deliberate. I never step outside to investigate. The memory replays constantly, the omnipresent hum, the men who seemed to know something before I spoke, the vanished recording. Work continues, but an underlying sensation persists. Something is watching. Now, I close windows even on hot nights. In moments of quiet, I feel that pulse again. Faint but real, vibrating beneath the house's skin. I don't discuss this with anyone. People dismiss such experiences as crazy. Every night, I check the clock and windows, waiting. My phone sits on the counter, just in case. When wind moves pine needles, the air seems to hum. Are they out there, waiting? It's not a screaming terror, but a deep unease that permeates everything. Something fundamental has shifted. I've tried rationalizing, electrical interference, a truck subwoofer, a mental trick, but I know what I heard. I know who appeared that next evening standing perfectly still. Nothing feels the same anymore. The night felt different from the start. At 3:30 a.m., I was pushing a mop through the main lobby of the industrial park, surrounded by old fluorescent lights buzzing in an uneven rhythm. The HVAC system hummed, making the building seem alive, breathing. Early September brought a cold that still held traces of late summer warmth, with sharp edges that cut through whenever a door opened. My headphones played an old country station, just enough to distract me from the overwhelming silence. But this night was quieter than usual, unnervingly so. When I stepped out the east side service door to grab trash from the loading dock, something felt off. The empty lot seemed different. That's when I saw it. A figure glowed faintly, pale and white, moving across the lot without touching the ground, not walking, but sliding, almost floating. I froze. The shape was human-like, but wrapped in light or fog. I squinted, hoping it was just a weird reflection from the security lights, but every light was steady, and this glow matched nothing. It passed behind a line of trailers and vanished. No sound. No gravel crunching, no car engine, nothing. I stared, waiting for it to reappear, but it didn't. My first instinct was to dismiss it as imagination, maybe a reflection on my glasses or a trick of shadows, but my gut knew otherwise. Now I live with the memory. The blinds stay closed, doors locked. Every passing car makes me look out, half expecting someone in a black suit. Though I haven't heard that hum again, sometimes the house creaks in a way that brings back that vibration beneath the floorboards. The pulse, the sound that shouldn't exist. I don't understand what happened. I don't know what it means. All I know is something did happen, and it left its mark. That morning started like any other shift. I went out to lock the east doors around 5 a.m. and noticed something odd. A small car parked at the far end of the lot. No lights, no sound. It hadn't been there when I arrived at 11 p.m., and nobody was around. I brushed it off, thinking maybe a co-worker had left it overnight. The parking lot was big enough that people sometimes used it to rest or just park. When the sun began to rise around 6 a.m., casting a pale light across the lot, I walked back to my car and suddenly froze. Two men were standing right by my driver's side. They wore new, pressed black suits and wide-brimmed hats. Their faces looked almost blank in the dawn light, and I didn't recognize them from anywhere. "Morning," one said in an unnervingly calm voice, like he was reading from a script. "Were the security lights malfunctioning last night?" I hesitated, gripping my keys. "No, I don't think so. Everything looked fine." The second man nodded slowly. "Good. We just wanted to check. It's easy for things to go unnoticed when a building is empty." They stared at me without smiling or moving, waiting for me to say something more. My throat felt dry. "You're the janitor?" the first one asked. I nodded. Nothing else unusual. The second inquired. I wanted to tell them about the glowing figure I'd seen, but something in their demeanor made me feel that speaking about it might cause trouble. So I simply shook my head. "Good. Have a safe day," they said, walking away with an unnaturally smooth, synchronized movement. I watched them disappear behind a row of trailers. Sitting in my car, I couldn't shake the memory of the mysterious figure, the empty lot, and these strange men who appeared just as I was leaving. Later, when I told my wife about it, she didn't seem to take it seriously. I've been working the night shift for 2 years now, and it's usually pretty uneventful. Most nights, the most exciting thing is a raccoon tipping over a trash bin or a trucker grabbing coffee before dawn. But that morning was different. A week later, I asked a co-worker if anyone had been in the lot early that morning. He shook his head, didn't see anyone unusual. When I pressed, he just laughed and said it was probably a weird dream or a prank. But I wasn't convinced. That afternoon, I drove past the park. Everything looked normal. The lights worked, and the lot was empty. Yet something felt off. Those two men, their questions, their timing, nothing about them seemed right. They weren't like typical contractors or security inspectors, too calm, too precise. Now I catch myself looking for them, driving past the park at night, checking the lot. Strange reflections catch my eye in the windows, shadows moving too smoothly. Once, I thought I saw a glowing figure on the edge of the tree line behind the trailers, but it vanished before I could get closer. I haven't seen the men again. Part of me doesn't want to. But every time I pass that lot or hear the hum of those old fluorescent lights, a cold, tight feeling creeps over me. I keep wondering what they wanted to know about the lights, about me, about the lot. I tell myself I imagined it all. Maybe I did, but I know what I saw. Those men were real enough to stand there at dawn, like the world hadn't even noticed them. Now, I drive past the lot slower, windows up, lights on. I park under street lamps at night, just in case. Sometimes, if I catch the corner of my eye just right, I swear I can see that pale glow sliding across the lot. And I remember that morning how the world felt small, quiet, and like it wasn't entirely mine. I never talk about it at work, never bring it up, but with every shift I finish, every quiet lot I leave, I feel the weight of their gaze. Even when I'm alone. I was driving down a long, dark highway, the kind of road that feels endless. My playlist hummed softly in the background, just loud enough to keep me alert. But gradually, even the music blended into the steady drone of tires against asphalt. Something caught my eye, a light. At first I thought it was a star, but something was different. It was too bright, too steady, and it wasn't high in the sky. Instead, it seemed lower, almost like it was following me. I glanced through the windshield and tried to rationalize it. A plane, maybe. Or a reflection. Or just my tired eyes playing tricks after hours on the road. But the light remained. It tracked me through every turn and straight away, always just beyond the highway's curve. I checked my mirrors, searching for a car with an unusually bright headlight. Nothing. No other vehicles. No lights. Just that single white point moving alongside me. By mile marker 112, unease crept in. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and a cold sweat broke out on my neck. My heart pounded so loudly, I felt self-conscious, as if its rhythm might echo through the car. I considered pulling over, but dismissed the thought as irrational. When the rest stop appeared, I didn't hesitate. I slowed down, turned into the lot, and parked at the edge where the overhead lights barely reached. The car fell silent except for the soft ticking of the cooling engine. I switched off the radio and stared out at the desert. That's when I saw them. 2 men on a bench near the payphone. Black suits, black ties, black fedoras. Normally unremarkable, except they weren't talking. They weren't doing anything. Just sitting perfectly still, staring ahead as if they'd been waiting specifically for me. One of them moved slightly, not a greeting, but like a cat's disinterested glance. I tried to laugh it off, wondering if exhaustion or the desert's strange atmosphere was playing tricks on my mind, but something felt decidedly wrong. I stepped out to stretch, and the night was colder than expected. Stars dotted the sky, but one light caught my attention. It hovered directly above the lot, suspended and unmoving, as if waiting. My feet continued moving slowly, almost against my will. One of the men on the bench shifted his weight. The movement wasn't quite natural, smooth and deliberate, like he knew exactly how I was watching him. I said evening out of some instinctive social reflex. No response. Not a twitch, not a nod. I told myself I was imagining things and walked back to my car. Glancing over my shoulder, both men remained perfectly still on the bench, watching. That strange light had moved slightly closer, or so it seemed. My pulse quickened. Sitting in the car, I locked the doors and stared at the lot. The men hadn't moved, the light remained, now blindingly white, like a spotlight. No wires, no reflection, no visible aircraft, just a pure, steady glow. I started the engine, pretending to scroll through my phone. I needed a reason to leave, to make my departure seem casual. When I pulled out, something stopped my breath. The bench was empty. No men, not behind a bush, not near a car, not walking anywhere. They had vanished. I blinked and shook my head. Maybe they left when I started the car. Maybe it was nothing. Back on the highway, I stayed carefully in the center lane, scanning the mirrors. The light had disappeared too, leaving only empty desert. My heart gradually slowed, but the tension lingered in my shoulders. Driving in silence, I replayed the scene. That light had followed me for miles. The 2 men sitting perfectly still, as if they'd known exactly where I would stop, waiting for me. I tried to rationalize it. A late-night art project? Pranksters in suits? A distant plane landing? A mirage? Nothing made sense. None of the explanations fit. Years have passed, but that night still haunts me. It happened on a long, empty stretch of desert highway where the darkness seems to swallow everything. I'd never thought much about telling anyone, uncertain if there was even anything to report. No crime had occurred, No clear explanation existed. My routine drive came about a week after the initial incident. I traveled the same road at the same time, scanning the horizon for any trace of what I'd seen before. The light, the bench, the two men, nothing appeared. Just me, the asphalt, and an endless canopy of stars. Now, when I drive long highways, I catch myself glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see that tiny pinpoint of light. In the darkest moments when the road is silent, I sometimes think I glimpse a shadow on the shoulder, something perfectly still, watching. I never stop at that rest area anymore. It began around 2 a.m. on a sweltering August night. Unable to sleep, I sat on my couch in the bottom half of a small Ohio duplex, windows cracked open, seeking any hint of a breeze. That's when I heard it, a sound unlike anything familiar. Initially, I mistook it for a distant truck or late-night machinery, but this sound was different. A low, minor, steady hum with a strange pulse, like concert bass but quieter and more physical. My windows actually vibrated with each rhythmic swell. The sound seemed to emanate from everywhere simultaneously. Walking to the kitchen window, I saw nothing. The street was dead quiet, no cars, no people. On impulse, I grabbed my phone and started recording, thinking my friend Kevin, who works with sound, might help identify it. After about 2 minutes, the hum abruptly stopped. Total silence. Not even crickets. I immediately replayed the recording. The low vibration was faint but distinct, with that peculiar rhythmic swelling. I listened repeatedly, trying to understand its origin. Underground work? A power issue? Nothing felt right. Uneasy. I went to bed. The next morning, I asked my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Patel, if she'd heard anything. She hadn't. I was home around 9 o'clock that evening, midway through a sandwich, when a knock at the door interrupted me. Opening it, I found 2 men standing on my porch. They were tall, wearing identical black suits, white shirts, and black ties, looking like they'd stepped out of an old photograph. No badges, no clipboards, nothing identifying them. "Good evening," one of them spoke immediately. "We're checking with residents in the area. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" The phrasing caught me off guard. Not a simple, "Did you hear a noise?" but audio disturbances. When I asked who they were, the first man gave a quick, mirthless smile. "We're with a federal survey group. Just need to confirm if you've noticed anything unusual." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I mentioned hearing a low humming sound the night before. Both men nodded slightly as if this was precisely what they'd anticipated. The second man, who hadn't spoken, pulled out a small notepad but didn't write anything. Just held it. "Did you record it?" the first man asked. Something went cold inside me. I hadn't mentioned recording anything. Playing dumb, I said I'd only noticed the sound for a couple of minutes. They exchanged a quick glance. "If it happens again," the first man said, "please do not attempt to capture it. Just make a note of the time." Then, as abruptly as they'd arrived, they thanked me for my cooperation and walked down the driveway. There was no car out front when I'd opened the door. By the time I looked out, they were already halfway down the street, walking side by side in silence. I locked the door immediately. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 minutes, but it left me deeply unsettled. How did they know about the recording? Nobody else knew, not even Kevin. I hadn't sent him the clip. That night, I sat in darkness, phone in hand, waiting for the hum to return. It didn't, but with every passing car and house creak, I felt watched, like someone was standing outside, listening. The night started like any other. During the late summer in Nebraska, I work at a small garage outside Lincoln, and that evening I'd been fixing a transmission for a client who needed his truck the next morning. By the time I cleaned up and locked the place, the streets were completely empty. My route home winds through county roads, lined with endless cornfields where you can drive for 10 minutes without seeing another soul. Windows down and radio low. I was just trying to unwind after a long day. About 10 minutes into the drive, something caught my eye, a strange glow off to the right side of the road. At first, I thought it might be farm equipment, but something wasn't right. It wasn't moving, and the color was all wrong. Not the harsh yellow of headlights or the red of taillights, but a soft whitish-blue glow, steady and spread out wider than any light I'd seen before. As I got closer, I realized the light was coming from the middle of a cornfield. I slowed down, pulled onto the gravel shoulder, and killed the engine. From maybe 50 yards away, I could see the cornrows illuminated, each stalk casting sharp shadows. Then I saw it. Not a tractor, not anything I'd ever seen before. A flat disc about 30 feet across, sitting between the rows. The light wasn't shining on it. It was coming from within. The entire surface glowed faintly, as if the metal itself was luminous. I sat in the truck's cab for a full minute, just staring. I wanted to get closer, but I'd left my phone charging back at the shop. Part of me wanted to investigate, while another part screamed to drive home and forget what I'd seen. Curiosity won out. Later that night, I tried to record what I'd witnessed. But when I went to play back the file, something was wrong. It was still on my phone's list, time-stamped at 2:07 a.m., but it wouldn't play. Just an error message. I tried connecting the phone to my computer, same result. The file existed but was empty, showing 0 seconds. I haven't heard that strange hum again since that night. But sometimes when I'm up late, I'll glance out the window and think I see two figures standing just at the edge of the shadows across the street. I never go out to check. I fired up the truck back on and swung around to the garage. Just minutes later, I grabbed my phone and headed back to the same spot, but this time the mysterious glow had vanished. Rolling down the gravel shoulder, I scanned the rose field carefully. The disc was gone, or at least I couldn't spot it anymore. Instead, two men stood near the field's edge where I'd stopped earlier. Their appearance was immediately strange. Black jackets, dark pants, no farmer-like gear, no reflective vests, no caps, no flashlights. Just two figures standing perfectly still, facing the road. I slowed but kept moving. One man raised his hand in a half wave, signaling me to stop. Against my instincts, I lowered the window. He stepped closer, close enough for moonlight to reveal pale, clean-shaven skin. Mid-40s says, with an unchanging expression. "Field's closed tonight," he stated flatly. Spraying, he claimed. No greeting, no further explanation. I looked past him into the corn rows. Nothing. No equipment, no tanks, no engine sounds, just darkness and corn swaying in the night breeze. I asked about the light I'd seen, but he repeated his monotone message about field closure. The second man remained motionless, standing a few feet back, hands at his sides, staring silently. Neither looked like they belonged in a cornfield at midnight. I nodded, muttered an apology, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, they stood watching, unmoving. Home again, my mind raced. That initial glow haunted me. How unnatural it looked. How the disc seemed to illuminate the corn from underneath. But the men troubled me more. Their sudden appearance, like they'd been waiting. Their explanation rang hollow. What farmers spray fields at night without machinery or lights? The next day, I drove the same road in daylight. Everything appeared normal. Rows intact, no tracks, no burning, no equipment. I slowed at the spot of the previous night's strange encounter, searching for any sign of what I'd witnessed. I usually run at night after work around 10 or so. The park near my place in Northern Virginia has a decent trail that loops through some woods and back around a big open field, maybe 2 miles total. It's not lit, but I always bring a headlamp. Most nights it's empty, except for the occasional dog walker. This was early October, one of those clear, cool nights where you can see every star. I'd left my phone in the car, which I almost never do, but I wanted a break from music. It was quiet except for my footsteps and the crickets. About halfway through my second lap, I slowed down when I hit the open field. I like to look up at the sky when I pass that part, 'cause it's the only stretch, without trees. I stopped jogging, leaned over with my hands on my knees to catch my breath, and tilted my head back. That's when I noticed something strange. A patch of stars, maybe the size of my hand, shifted a little. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks after running. But I stood there a while and I saw it again. The stars weren't twinkling like the rest. They were duller, almost faint, like they were behind a film of glass. And the whole patch moved, sliding a few inches to the left, then stopping dead still. I kept blinking, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe a cloud had drifted in, but there weren't any clouds. The rest of the sky was sharp and clear. I turned off my headlamp just to check. With the light gone, it was even more obvious. This section of sky wasn't lining up with the rest. It was like someone had taken a square cutout and was dragging it across the stars. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I got uncomfortable. Not scared exactly, just this deep sense of wrongness, like I wasn't supposed to be looking at it. I switched the headlamp back on and forced myself to keep running. Since then, I've thought about that night often. Sometimes when I drive home late, I'll slow down without realizing it, scanning for any strange light out there in the rows. And every time I do, I half expect to see something waiting. I once thought I saw a faint ring in the dirt between the corn rows, but maybe it was just where the irrigation had cut deeper. I didn't get out to check. I've passed that field plenty of times since then, and I've never seen anything like it again. I was finishing my loop around the park when I noticed two men leaning against my car in the empty parking lot. They weren't typical late-night runners, dressed entirely in black, too polished and put together for park visitors. No reflective gear, no water bottles, just waiting. As I approached, they remained motionless. One of them spoke with an unsettlingly calm voice. "Enjoy the illusion." His words were precise, deliberate. They weren't smiling or threatening, just blank. The taller one studied me like I was a specimen, tilting his head slightly. When I asked what they meant, they repeated the same cryptic phrase. "Did you enjoy the illusion?" My hand kept brushing against my keys in my shorts pouch. They were blocking my car, and I felt increasingly unnerved. I told them I needed to leave. The taller man stepped aside slowly, never breaking eye contact. The other stayed by the driver's door. I unlocked the car, the flashing lights and sound startling me. As I slid in and started the engine, one of them leaned down to my window, not knocking, just positioning his face level with mine. Wearing dark glasses at night, I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt his intense gaze. "Best not to look up too long," he said. Then they both turned simultaneously and walked straight into the dark woods, not toward a car or street, but disappearing into the trees. I sat idling, watching the trailhead, half expecting them to reappear. They didn't. Driving home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. The next morning I returned to the park in broad daylight. Families walked dogs, kids rode bikes. Everything seemed normal, with no trace of the previous night's strange encounter. I was out fishing that morning from Booth Bay Harbor, the late September warmth still clinging to the air. My little 20-feet lobster boat drifted a few miles beyond the usual spots. With fog so thick it muted everything, the engine noise, the gulls, even the waves slapping against the hull seemed dampened. Around 8 I started pulling in my first net. Nothing special, just some seaweed and a couple of undersized cod I tossed back. The second haul was different. When I dragged the net over the side, something unusual was tangled in the mesh. A metallic object, roughly the size of a basketball, but more of an oval shape with strange seams running across its surface. Its appearance was odd. Dull, light-brushed steel, but with scorched spots. It felt unnaturally light when I tapped it. I initially thought it might be airplane debris or a broken buoy. As I leaned closer, trying to spot any markings, I heard another engine cutting through the fog. A sleek black motorboat approached. Not a typical fishing vessel. No visible registration or name. Two men stood aboard, wearing matching black jackets and caps that looked almost like uniforms. Their sunglasses seemed bizarre in the thick grey morning. One called out, "You pulled something that doesn't belong to you." His tone wasn't a joke. They pulled alongside my boat, close enough that I could see the precision of their clothing. The driver stated firmly, "That's military property." I still run there sometimes, but now I'm always prepared. My phone is always with me, and I can't help but scan the sky nervously when I pass that field, remembering how quickly things can change and how some mysteries are better left unexplored. I was out fishing in the thick fog when I pulled up something strange in my net. Before I could even get a good look, two men in a boat appeared out of nowhere. They were direct, almost robotic. "It's military debris. We'll be taking it." I asked about their credentials, but they just repeated the same line. Their sudden arrival felt off. I wanted to cooperate, but something about their approach made me uneasy. I requested to see identification, but they just stared, silent and unmoving, until I looked away. One of them stepped forward with a gloved hand, expecting me to hand over the object. I refused. I told them I'd call the Coast Guard to verify the situation. That's when their demeanor shifted. The man at the wheel leaned in and said flatly, "You didn't see this. Understand." Without warning, the other man boarded my boat. He moved with practiced precision, carefully extracting the metal object from the net. They transported it to their boat, setting it down almost reverently. I was angry but stayed silent. Their calculated movements made me deeply uncomfortable. As quickly as they arrived, the fog swallowed them. Their engine noise faded, leaving me alone in the grey silence. I tried to believe their story about military equipment, but details bothered me. Their boat had no lights, a violation of maritime regulations, especially in dense fog. More suspiciously, they'd found me immediately, with no other vessels or aircraft in sight. I finished hauling my nets, hands trembling. I kept scanning the mist, half expecting them to return. Back at the harbour around noon, I intended to casually mention the encounter. But when I tried to speak, the words caught in my throat. How could I describe two mysterious strangers in a black boat without sounding completely unhinged? That night, the encounter continued to haunt me. The truck's driveway became my workspace as I filled out the logbook, paying little mind to the car that rolled past the house. Small roads see their share of traffic, but something felt off. The sedan didn't continue down the lane. Instead, it stopped, lights out, barely visible in the shadows. Nights began to blur together. The same vehicle returned, crawling past at nearly the same hour. Dark and silent, it would pause before sliding away. By the third evening, I'd retreated inside, watching through half-closed blinds. This time, two shadowy figures occupied the front seats, motionless and waiting. Weeks followed with an unsettling tension. My boat trips became shorter, hugging the shoreline. I'd run just a couple of nets before hurrying back, always scanning the water and horizon, the black boat that had originally sparked. My unease remained absent, yet the memory lingered. Late harbour returns now carried a new anxiety. A car in the rearview mirror would occasionally track me, staying just a moment too long before turning away. Months have passed without incident, but I can't forget that morning in the fog. They appeared so suddenly, as if they'd been watching, knowing precisely what I would retrieve before I even knew myself. My westbound journey on I-80 began around 3 a.m., hauling pallets from Fort Wayne. The May air hung cool, the sky crystal clear. Miles of highway stretched before me, interrupted only by occasional passing headlights. Radio silent, I listened to the engine's steady hum. Just outside Ottawa, something unusual caught my eye. A glow hung low over the highway, maybe 50 feet above the asphalt. Initially, I assumed it was construction lighting, but as I slowed and leaned forward, I realized this was something different. Triangular and precise, with 3 white corner points connected by a dim luminescence, its shape defied any aircraft I'd ever encountered. My rig's headlights caught something hanging motionless above the road, a triangular shape with a smooth metallic surface like polished stone. No sound, no movement. My heart raced as I eased into the left lane, the road empty except for me and this strange object overhead. When I passed beneath it, my CB erupted with loud static, making me flinch. The dash lights flickered briefly. As I continued driving, I kept checking my mirrors. The triangle remained suspended where I'd first seen it, growing smaller in the distance. For the rest of that run, my hands gripped the wheel tightly. I expected anything to reappear, but nothing did. Around 5, I rolled into the service yard and parked without telling anyone what I'd experienced. The next night found me at a truck stop outside Joliet, following my usual routine. Late, close to 2 a.m., the diner was half empty. A few drivers sat scattered around, and a weary waitress seemed ready to fall asleep on her feet. I slid into a booth, ordered coffee and eggs, and opened my log book. That's when I noticed them, 2 men sitting directly across from me, about 12 feet away. Their black suits were distinctive, plain, without sheen or wrinkles, white shirts, buttoned to the top, no ties. They sat perfectly upright, hands folded on the table. Initially, I thought they might be businessmen, though odd for such a late hour. But they had no food, no drinks, nothing. Just sitting and watching, not staring obviously, but angled just enough that I knew their eyes were fixed on me. Every time I looked up, they hadn't moved. No sips, no words between them, just absolute stillness. When the waitress brought my coffee refill, I leaned toward her half-jokingly. "Those guys been sitting there long?" I asked quietly. She glanced over, then back at me. "Who?" I pointed to the booth across from me. 2 men in suits. She gave me a strange look, as if I was playing some kind of joke. She shrugged. "Haven't seen anyone like that in here tonight." I didn't push it. I just nodded, stirred my coffee, and kept my head down. I was working the night shift at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town, massive place with 15 loading bays, a small office block, and about 3 acres of fenced lot. My job was simple: watch monitors, log truck arrivals, and do occasional walk-arounds. Most nights were dead quiet. This night was clear and cold, with wind kicking up occasionally, but nothing triggering the motion sensors. I was sipping stale coffee when something caught my eye on camera 12, which covers the far corner of the southern yard. No lights out there, except in perimeter ones. At first I thought the image was glitching, but leaning closer, I saw a shape, not a truck, not anything familiar, sitting low behind the far fence line near the trees. Something was off. It wasn't casting shadows like it should. The thing was glowing, a soft whitish light that seemed to pulse gently. Later that night, I finished my meal quickly at a roadside diner, throwing some bills on the table. As I walked past a booth, 2 men sat motionless, hands folded, facing forward. Neither looked at me, even as I passed within arm's reach. Outside in the cool night air, heading to my truck, the parking lot was quiet except for a distant reefer unit's rumble. When I glanced back at the diner windows, the booth was empty. No chime of the door, no footsteps, no car pulling out. They were simply gone. Back in my truck, I locked the doors and sat staring across the fuel island. My logbook sat on the passenger seat. The page I'd been writing on was blank, though I knew I'd filled half a page while eating. Throughout the night, I drove with heightened awareness, constantly checking my mirrors. Every set of headlights behind me made me tense. The next morning at a rest area, I checked the logbook again. The page remained untouched, clean as if I'd never written on it. Now I avoid fueling at that stop. And when I see a triangle of lights in the sky, even far off, I keep my eyes firmly on the road. The security feed was my first clue something was off. A glowing object hung motionless in the yard, clear as day on camera 12. I couldn't explain it. I stared, frozen, watching for half a minute as the glow seemed to tilt or rotate without a sound. Then, faster than a blink, it vanished completely. Moments later, an unmarked van pulled up outside the security office. Not the kind of arrival we get, especially at 2 a.m. 2 men stepped out, dressed identically in black suits, white shirts, and black ties. They didn't look like any delivery or inspection team I'd ever seen. The taller one had an unnaturally pale, almost grey complexion and a narrow face. His companion kept his head down, eyes fixed on the ground. Neither showed any emotion. When I buzzed the intercom and asked if I could help them, the tall man looked straight into the camera and said flatly, "We need access to the southern loading bay." That request stopped me cold. The southern loading bay isn't something you'd find on a public map. It's an old, unused section hidden behind newer buildings. Only management and security staff know it exists. I hesitated to respond. When I asked who they were with, the shorter man glanced at his partner and merely said, "Time-sensitive matter." Something felt wrong. These weren't typical visitors. They stood perfectly still, no nervous movements, just waiting. I said I'd need to call my supervisor. The tall man claimed they'd already spoken to him. I knew that was impossible. Dennis, our on-call supervisor, lived 2 towns away and would have warned me about any incoming visitors. Every instinct told me not to let them in, but they didn't seem like the type you could easily refuse. My nights on shift used to feel routine until that strange encounter. 2 men approached the security door, and something about them was off from the start. The shorter one stood close to the glass, his eyes unnaturally dark and flat under the overhead lights, not like any other visitors I'd seen before. I told them I couldn't let them in without proper clearance and reached for the phone. But before I could make a call, they simply turned and walked back to their van. No arguments, no confrontation, just a smooth, silent retreat. The van pulled away without headlights, gliding down the access road until darkness swallowed it completely. I tried tracking them on the road cameras, but they never appeared. This was odd, given the road only had 2 turns before reaching the highway. When I checked camera 12, the yard was empty and still. Every small sound made me jump for the rest of my shift. No more vans arrived. No strange shapes lurked behind the fence. When Dennis arrived at 6 to take over, I shared what happened. He looked at me like I was joking. No visitor logs, no reports. We checked the gate camera feed, and something was definitely wrong. A recording for that time slot was gone. a corrupted file according to the system. Every other camera worked fine, except camera 12, which went black for about 4 minutes right after I saw that initial glow. After that, I kept quiet. But late at night, I can't help scanning that far corner, half expecting to see that pale light pulsing in the darkness. My flying career had been pretty standard, over a decade of charter and sightseeing flights. This particular afternoon seemed ordinary, a short trip from Billings to a private airstrip near Sheridan. The winter sky was cold and clear, with thin, high clouds giving everything a washed-out, silvery appearance. About 30 minutes from landing, something extraordinary happened. What initially looked like a cloud break suddenly moved. A metallic disc dropped vertically from the cloud layer, stopping mid-air for just 2 seconds before shooting horizontally and vanishing into the mountain haze. No sound, no trail, just gone before I could fully process what I'd witnessed. The airstrip felt eerily empty as I landed. No one was around, not the usual ground crew, not even a driver in the fuel truck. 2 men stood in the shadows of the hangar, both dressed identically in black suits, white shirts, and dark ties. They looked pale, almost sickly, as if sunlight was a stranger to them. As I shut down the engine and climbed out, the taller one approached. "Mr. Harlan," he said in a flat, mechanical voice. The shorter man held a clipboard with papers attached. They knew my name, but I couldn't recall how. "We'd like a moment of your time," the shorter one said. They were here about something I'd seen during my approach, an aerial anomaly. But I hadn't reported anything. I hadn't even figured out what I'd witnessed myself. I saw something, I admitted. Not sure what. "That's why we're here," the taller one responded. "Standard procedure for atmospheric interference reports in controlled airspace." He handed me a pen and flipped the clipboard toward me. The form was filled with small, dense text. I caught glimpses of phrases like atmospheric interference and no threat to flight safety. They wanted me to sign, essentially confirming whatever I'd seen was a known atmospheric effect. No mention of an aircraft. No mention of anything unidentified. "Who are you with?" I asked. "Federal jurisdiction," the shorter man replied, as if that explained everything. "Which agency?" "Federal jurisdiction," he repeated. The wind picked up, causing the hangar doors to rattle. The taller one spoke again, his voice carrying an odd weight. "You did see atmospheric interference," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I saw a metallic object," I said slowly. The shorter man stepped closer, uncomfortably close. The ground crew was nowhere to be seen when I first landed. The terminal building stood dark and silent. I noticed something strange about the 2 men who approached me. Their eyes seemed off, with flexics that looked too uniform, almost grey. The taller one insisted what I'd seen wasn't metallic, but atmospheric interference. I signed the clipboard without reading it, an uneasy feeling growing inside me. They moved with an unsettling synchronicity, stepping back in perfect unison after I signed. No pleasantries, just a slight nod before they walked into the shadowed part of the hangar, and I followed moments later. The hangar was completely empty. No doors were open, no trace of where they could have gone. The silence broke with another plane starting up down the airstrip, and suddenly everything felt normal again. My usual ground crew guy appeared asking about fuel. When I mentioned the 2 men, he looked confused, saying no, one had been around all day. I didn't press the issue. I paid for my fuel and left. Later, I discovered my flight log was missing, the notepad gone, though the pen remained clipped, exactly where I'd left it. Those men were never seen again. My name is Lena Ortiz, and I'm a photographer with a passion for capturing lightning. Storm chasing is my calling. There's something mesmerizing about that raw energy slicing through the sky. This particular evening was different. I was set up near a dirt road with power line pylons stretching across an open field, a location I knew well. But something felt wrong. The air was unnaturally heavy, oppressive. An eerie silence hung everywhere. No crickets, no wind, just a thick quiet that seemed to press against my skin. I watched the clouds gathering, sensing something was about to change. The storm had been raging, and I was positioned with my camera, waiting for the perfect lightning shot. When the bolt struck sharp and close, I captured the moment. Lowering my camera, I expected to review the image and wait for another strike. But something unusual caught my attention. Between 2 power line pylons, a dark shape flickered briefly, a perfectly round silhouette slipping in and out of view. I blinked, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was a bird, a drone, or just a trick of light and shadow. Checking my camera screen, I zoomed in on the recently taken photo. There it was, a round shape hovering near the power lines, illuminated by the lightning. It looked solid, not a mere reflection or camera glitch. My heart raced, though I tried to convince myself it was probably just a weather balloon. Days later, I found myself in a quiet downtown cafe, editing photos on my laptop. The place was nearly empty. Suddenly, a man in a plain black suit approached my table and sat down without a word. His calm demeanor carried an unsettling intensity. "I see you've been photographing the storm near the pylons," he said quietly. Confused and slightly unnerved, I nodded. Before I could react, he grabbed my laptop and pulled up the photo with the mysterious dark disk. Using a small portable printer from his briefcase, he quickly produced a black and white copy. Sliding the print across the table, he locked eyes with me. "If you decide to share this image, consider framing it differently," he advised cryptically. Before I could ask what he meant, he stood up and walked away as suddenly as he had appeared. I stared at the print. The disc-shaped silhouette was even more pronounced in black and white, leaving me with more questions than answers. I was working the night shift at Brook Hill Medical, stationed in ICU 3. It was around 3:10 a.m. on a Thursday, our usual time for restocking crash carts. The night had been unusually quiet, with no new patients since midnight. While catching up on my charting at the nurse's station, I noticed something odd. The hallway lights flickered briefly, but only in a specific row leading past room 314 to the fire exit. At first, I didn't pay much attention. The building was old, and electrical quirks weren't uncommon, especially with the HVAC system occasionally causing power surges on the 5th floor. Things started getting strange after that. My phone began experiencing unexplained disruptions. Calls would drop randomly, and my GPS would show me in locations I'd never been. I started noticing people watching me, men in plain black clothes who seemed to blend seamlessly into crowds. They never approached, but their presence was undeniable. One night, hoping to understand what I'd witnessed earlier, I went out to photograph lightning. The storm was intense, wind whipping around as I set up my camera. For a brief moment I thought I saw that mysterious disk again, flickering near some pylons. But when I tried to capture it, it vanished. I returned home, feeling uneasy. The next morning, I found a Polaroid slipped under my door. The grainy image showed my apartment window from the outside. My reflection was visible, but what caught my attention was the faint shadow behind me, a man in a suit. No note accompanied the photo. From that point, I became increasingly paranoid. I stopped sharing storm photographs and deleted all related images from my devices. Yet the feeling of being watched never subsided. Weeks passed with the men in black maintaining their distant surveillance. Strange technological glitches continued, and though I kept photographing storms, hoping to capture evidence of the disk, it never reappeared. Some mysteries, I realized, are meant to remain unseen, and some stories aren't meant to be fully told. The light started flickering again, longer this time, with a slow dimming that faded in and out. A faint clicking sound hummed, similar to standing beneath a transformer. Checking the fire exit for a faulty bulb, I passed room 314 and noticed the double doors blinds were open. Mr. Stow, the double doors blinds were open. Gaza lay there, a long-term patient, intubated and sedated. Unconscious, yet he moved, one hand raised toward the ceiling, eyes closed. The monitors displayed nothing unusual. I watched his hand slowly fall back to the bed. Movement caught my eye through the window. Beyond the unit's side lay a small gravel-covered rooftop area, maintenance only, with vent hoods and large metal HVAC units. During daytime, housekeeping sometimes propped the linen room door open, but at night it was just dark. Something was up there. A flicker of movement appeared behind a vent stack, a tall, narrow shape standing unnervingly still. I wondered if it might be security, though we rarely had anyone up there without reason. Stepping closer to the window, I couldn't make out a face, but the silhouette was clear. Backlit by city lights reflecting off the cloud cover, the figure stood perfectly upright. Its head tilted slightly, arms hanging too straight, like a mannequin attempting to appear human. The lights flickered harder this time. When they returned to full brightness, the shape had vanished, I radioed the front desk, asking about roof personnel. They confirmed no one was up there. Security checked the access hatch, reporting it remained locked from the inside. I didn't report the incident, dismissing it as a shadow or hallucination from too many night shifts. Still, unease settled in. That part of the unit felt inexplicably colder. Other nurses later joked about ghosts in the vents, but I couldn't laugh. As my shift ended and I headed to the break room to clock out, something caught my eye near the vending machines. Standing by the elevator machines, he looked out of place. Pressed black suit, pale, neat, like he just stepped out of a catalogue. No badge, no scrubs, not a doctor, security guard, or representative. I was walking down the hallway when something made my stomach drop. He wasn't looking at anything, just facing the elevators with a slim black folder under his arm. When I passed, he stepped forward and said my full name directly, without any introduction. Just stated it like he already knew me. He handed me the folder. Inside was a single page printed on plain white paper, no official letterhead. The typed statement described an anomalous rooftop event between 2:45 and 3:30 a.m. on April 11th. The document required my agreement not to discuss any visual or auditory phenomena with hospital staff, patients, media, or law enforcement. A signature line waited, along with spaces for date and time. "This is for the hospital's internal review," he said flatly. "It will not affect your employment record. Cooperation is strongly advised." His words sounded overly formal, like a script poorly translated into English. I noticed a strange symbol on his tie pin, a circle with a line through it. I refused to sign without a supervisor present. He stood motionless, holding the folder, not blinking. 15 seconds passed. The elevator dinged. 2 people stepped out. Without another word, he turned and walked away, heading toward the old records room before disappearing around a corner. That afternoon, I showed the form to my supervisor. She looked puzzled, saying she knew nothing about internal reviews or rooftop incidents. "Hospital forms always go through admin," she explained. She took the folder, promising to follow up. The next night, she told me the folder was empty when she reopened it. I haven't seen the man since, but sometimes, when I'm near the West Wing supply elevator, I feel watched, especially by the old access door to the roof. And those hallway lights, they still flicker, always at the same time. I was Rachel, a storm photographer who spent years chasing wild weather across Texas. That day near Amarillo was different. The sky had been electric, thunderheads stacking up and lightning slicing through clouds. The air was thick with rain and ozone, my camera gear packed tight and ready. While setting up near a dirt road off Highway 287, something caught my eye through the long telephoto lens. A cumulonimbus cloud had weird ripples along its edges, like waves on water. Suddenly, a small metallic shape darted through the storm cells. Not a plane, not a bird, completely silent and leaving no trail. I snapped photos frantically, adjusting focus and shutter speed. The object was sleek and shiny, weaving effortlessly before vanishing almost instantly. When I checked the negatives later, there it was, a dark disk of polished metal catching the last sunlight. Back home, I retreated to my basement dark room. A single red bulb illuminated trays of developing chemicals. I worked carefully, methodically processing the film. As images emerged, the storm landscape took shape, and then that strange metallic blur appeared again, twisting through the air in a way I'd never seen before. The house was silent, except for a dripping kitchen faucet. Suddenly, the basement door creaked open. No footsteps on the stairs behind me. I turned and saw him, a man in a black suit, no tie, with a pale face and sharp features. He stood calmly in the red glow, watching me. My years of freelance storm photography had shown me plenty of strange things, but nothing like this. Cold nights on folding chairs and freezing fingers were part of the job. But this was something else entirely. He seemed serious, like someone out of place. His eyes caught the light, reflecting the negatives in his pupils. Can photographs hide secrets? His voice was low and steady. Can a negative show something that isn't really there? Something that might never have existed? I blinked, unsure how to respond. He stepped closer, hands folded calmly but deliberately. Scanning the contact sheets pinned to the wall. "You've captured something," he said. "Something people aren't meant to see." My stomach tightened. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm someone who ensures certain images don't spread. The tone was polite yet carried an unmistakable edge of authority. I felt trapped, knowing I couldn't let him take the film. What do you want? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. He pulled out a small card. No logo, just black text on white. We keep things quiet, he explained. Destroy the negatives, and you won't be bothered. My heart raced. I wanted to refuse, to demand answers, but his calm certainty made me hesitate. My phone buzzed upstairs, a message from Mike about breakfast. The man noticed my distraction. Think it over, he said, then walked out, the basement door closing softly behind him. I stayed downstairs, staring at the negatives. The images were real. I had proof, but so was his warning. Strange occurrences followed. My camera gear would move slightly when I was certain I'd left it untouched. Phone calls dropped with static in certain house areas. Soft footsteps outside windows at night revealed nothing when I looked. Telling anyone seemed impossible. A mysterious man demanding I erase evidence. It sounded crazy. One night, I examined the negatives again. The metallic object was gone. Not faded or scratched, simply disappeared. I'm Tom Keller, a 37-year-old rail fan who's been obsessed with trains, all tracks and signals for as long as I can remember. My small town in upstate New York sits near abandoned industrial lines where rust consumes the rails and weeds push through the ties. One early fall morning, I ventured out before dawn to explore a particular stretch of abandoned track running through woods near an old quarry. Strange light stories had circulated, but I was mostly seeking quiet time with my camera and the rails. The eastern horizon began to soften its darkness, creating that gentle blue-gray prelude to sunrise. The air felt crisp and damp, heavy with the scent of wet leaves and moss. As I walked, gravel crunched beneath my boots, the only sound breaking the morning silence. About 100 yards ahead, something unusual caught my eye. Sitting directly on the tracks was a craft unlike anything I'd ever seen. It resembled a wingless airplane, but smaller, perhaps the size of a large car. Its surface gleamed faintly, smoother than brushed metal, with no visible rivets or seams. A matte grey tone allowed it to almost dissolve into the misty rail landscape. No markings, no lights, just present. I froze, my usual composure wavering. Something felt fundamentally wrong. Slowly, I raised my camera and took a few pictures through the fog, attempting to capture this inexplicable object. Later, reviewing the images was surreal. The object was missing from the frames where it had been. I checked my camera's digital backup files. The images remained unchanged. It was as if the object had never been captured at all. I still have those developed photos and the mysterious card left by a stranger. They're stored in a box under my bed, alongside my camera. When storm clouds gather and the wind whispers just right, I contemplate chasing storms again. But something about that night, that man's cryptic question, holds me back. Maybe negatives can lie, or perhaps some things are better left unseen. The tracks were desolate that morning, with the craft sitting silently nearby. Its shape was unusual, sharp and angular, without typical aircraft features like wings or doors. It seemed designed for sliding or hovering rather than ground movement. Before I could approach, a distant engine sound caught my attention. A black sedan appeared at the tree line, rolling to a stop near the track entrance. The driver emerged, a tall man in his late 40s, wearing an expensive charcoal suit without a tie. His dark hair was slicked back, and his face revealed nothing, like someone trained to keep emotions hidden. Without introduction or small talk, he walked directly to me and delivered a stark warning. Tracks led to places you don't belong. I was taken aback, asking what he meant. He glanced at the craft and ground, repeating firmly, "It's best you don't touch anything here." His tone left no room for argument. When I explained I was just taking pictures and not seeking trouble, he nodded slowly. Then he returned to his sedan, which idled quietly before driving away without further interaction. After he left, something strange occurred. The craft began fading, obscured by thickening mist. Within moments, it vanished completely, leaving only empty rails and morning dew. I departed, feeling unsettled yet intrigued. In the days following, I repeatedly checked the location but found nothing. Sharing the story with friends yielded mostly laughter and dismissals. One suggested it was a military operation, but something felt different. No helicopters, patrol cars, or warning signs. Increasingly odd experiences followed. During walks near the tracks, I'd hear footsteps behind me, only to find no one present. Shadows would slip between trees, always just out of clear view. My phone developed peculiar behaviors, with calls dropping and strange disruptions when near certain areas. The encounter remained a persistent mystery, defying straightforward explanation. The night was quiet, just another late shift ending at the packaging plant outside Greensburg, Indiana. Around 12:40 a.m., I was driving home along CR 700E, a road so empty you could go miles without seeing another vehicle. Long stretches of corn and soy fields flanked me, with occasional mailboxes marking lonely gravel drives. Something felt off from the start. My radio began cutting out, dropping mid-sentence before popping back with no static. Switching stations didn't help. Then my headlights started flickering, dimming to half brightness before returning to normal. I slowed down, sensing something wasn't right. Up ahead, off the left side of the road, something hung motionless in the air above a cut field, near an old, half-collapsed barn with a rusted roof, one I'd passed countless times before. This thing was different, low and unmoving. Later, the strange occurrences continued. A black sedan followed me home. One evening, matching my speed precisely. At a stoplight, the driver sat absolutely still, staring straight ahead. When I changed routes, the car followed me right to my driveway before vanishing. Then a phone call started. Silence greeted me each time I answered. Once, slow, steady breathing came through the line before a soft click ended the connection. I stopped picking up after that. The whole experience felt like a bad dream. Photos I'd taken that morning remained on my camera, blurry and marked with odd light streaks. Something always held me back from returning to those tracks. As someone once said, maybe there are places you're not meant to go. Now, in the thick fog of a quiet night, I sometimes hear a faint hum, something sliding over metal tracks that no longer exist. I was driving home late, somewhere around 50 feet off the ground. Maybe less, when I saw something massive overhead. At first, it was just a dark shape blocking out the stars, with no lights or sound. Just this black void hanging in the sky. As I got closer, details emerged. A triangular shape, like a long flat wedge with soft rounded corners, stretched almost across the entire field. It wasn't stationary. Instead, it drifted smoothly, almost like a blimp, but more deliberate, balanced on the air with a steady, slow movement. 3 small red lights marked its underside, positioned near each point. Not blinking or glowing brightly, just present, like standby LEDs on electronics. I pulled over onto the shoulder and rolled down my window, expecting some kind of sound. A hum, a noise, anything. But there was nothing. Complete silence. No crickets, no wind. Not even my car's engine made a sound. The air itself seemed frozen. I watched for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I didn't reach for my phone, didn't even think to. I wasn't scared, but I was acutely aware of my solitude. Then, without tilting or rotating, the object began to rise slowly, steadily. It lifted straight up, remaining perfectly level, until it faded against the night sky. Those red dots never changed. It simply disappeared. The next morning started normally. I was off work, but the garbage truck woke my dog as usual. I fed her, made coffee, and that's when I noticed the black sedan in my driveway. No plates, tinted windows, looking like a government vehicle. 2 men in dark suits stood outside, one by the front step, the other near the car. No visible badges. When I cracked open the door and asked if they needed something, the man closest to the house smiled, not a wide smile, just enough to be unsettling. The Tuesday evening was settling into dusk as I drove through Red Rock Canyon, the sky holding on to its last bits of light, while shadows stretched long and dark. I was returning from a work trip in Vegas, taking the scenic route to clear my head. Never one for freeways if I could avoid them. A few weeks later, I found myself dealing with an unexpected visit. 2 men showed up at my house, polite but direct. The first approached my porch and asked if I'd been on County Road 700E the previous night near the collapsed barn. I confirmed I had been driving home from work. His gaze was studying, not threatening. As he asked if I'd seen anything unusual, I hesitated before mentioning the weird lights in the sky. The second man, standing by their car, called over and asked if I often imagined things at night. His tone wasn't mocking, but seemed genuinely curious, like he'd heard similar stories before. I firmly stated I was awake and driving, and I knew what I saw. They asked about outdoor cameras. I had none. They seemed satisfied with my responses, thanked me, and left. Their car backed out of the driveway, and they drove straight out of the neighborhood without stopping anywhere else. Later that day, I noticed something strange on my mailbox. A greasy grey smear covered its front. Only my mailbox, not the others. I wiped it off with a paper towel, leaving a streaky residue, which I ultimately threw away. That night, my dog's behavior was odd. She refused to go into the backyard, whining at the door and backing away when I opened it. I ended up walking her out front, where she kept looking upward, watching the sky silently. Since that day, I've changed my routine. Every evening when I drive home from work, I take a different route, just in case. Here's the rewritten text. The canyon road stretched out before me, quiet and lonely. Steep sandstone, cliffs rose on both sides, and at this hour, I was completely alone. As the sun dipped low, I spotted something unusual. A black sedan parked just past a sharp bend. No plates, not the kind of thing you expect to see in such a remote place. I slowed down, watching carefully. No roadblock, no construction cones, nothing official. Then two men approached my car. They were dressed identically in black suits and dark sunglasses, which seemed strange given the fading light. One was tall, around 40, the other shorter, and in his late 30s. Roads closed for maintenance, the tall one said without a smile. No greeting, just a flat statement. I looked up the road, nothing. No workers, no equipment, no signs. When I questioned this, the shorter man cut me off. Private job. No exceptions. I tried to explain I needed to get home, but they were firm. It's not safe, the tall guy said. Their car behind them was completely black. No visible windows, no markings. Something felt wrong, but I tried to stay calm. How long will maintenance take? I asked. Indefinite, came the reply. Reluctantly, I started to back up. In my mirror, I saw them return to their car. But when I looked again moments later, the sedan had vanished. No engine sound, no lights, just empty road and canyon walls. Confused, I crept forward, scanning for any sign of barriers or work crews. Nothing. I pulled over, got out, and looked around. Dry brush rustled in the wind. My phone showed no signal. Walking a bit up the road, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The canyon remained silent, offering no explanation. 2 summers ago, during the Cascades, I drove out to a remote stretch of County Road 221, about 30 miles east of Lander, Wyoming. It was a spot I knew well from past field work, nothing but scrub hills and a single broken windmill. My plan was simple. Park the truck off the shoulder, spread a blanket in the truck bed, and watch the meteor shower with my camera and a thermos of coffee. The sky that night was perfect. Completely clear, no clouds, no moon. Things got strange quickly. While scanning the landscape, I noticed a black sedan sitting motionless on the road. When I tried to get a better look, the car suddenly vanished. I searched the area, looking for tracks or any explanation, but found nothing. The whole scene felt eerily empty. As I drove back, the sky darkened to a deep blue, with the first stars emerging. About 10 minutes into my return trip, a peculiar light caught my attention. It wasn't like a plane or helicopter, just a soft, steady glow hovering just above the canyon rim. No matter how I tried to ignore it, the light seemed to follow me, always lingering at the edge of my vision. I stopped at a small diner near the canyon entrance. The place was deserted, except for Sam, the night cook. When I shared my experience, he didn't seem surprised. "You're not the first to see things like this out here," he said casually. He mentioned lights, strange figures, and roads that seemingly disappear without a trace. The encounter left me unsettled. On the drive home, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see the mysterious sedan again, but the road remained empty. Later, I checked local news and county road updates. Nothing unusual was reported, just standard warnings about rocky terrain. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the experience. I shared the story with friends who joked about government agents or alien encounters, A few days later, I discovered a blank scrap of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I folded it up and left it on the dashboard, where it remains untouched. That night, before sleeping, my mind kept replaying the inexplicable events, the vanishing car, the strange light, the mysterious men. I was out stargazing way earlier than peak activity, but I didn't mind. The solitude has always appealed to me, and the lack of cell service only made the experience better. Hours passed quietly, and I dozed off around 12:30. When I woke just after 2 a.m., the sky was illuminated. I set up my camera on a basic tripod in the truck bed, capturing long exposures. Everything seemed normal until sometime past 3, when something caught my attention on the road behind me. At first, I thought it was the tripod's shadow, but this shape didn't move when I moved. Standing dead center on the road, about 50 feet back, was a figure. No flashlight, no movement, just a silhouette. I watched, wondering if someone had pulled over, but I heard no car, no footsteps, nothing. This figure was unnervingly still. When I turned on my headlamp and swept the beam across the road, it didn't react. No flinching, no shielding of eyes, no stepping back. Quickly, I snapped a photo with my phone. The moment the shutter clicked, the figure turned and walked into the darkness, vanishing behind the road's low slope without a sound. I considered checking if they needed help, called out, but received no response. Deciding against chasing an unknown figure through the wilderness, I returned to my truck and examined the photo. The image revealed a thin, oddly proportioned figure. Arms seemed too long, the head strangely shaped, almost featureless, as if blurred or turned away. I convinced myself it was a camera glitch, though something about the image unsettled me. I saved the photo and locked my phone, trying to shake off the creepy feeling. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, and I watched meteors before leaving just before dawn. The next day, stopping for gas at a Conoco in Riverton around 7 a.m., I briefly went inside to use the bathroom. That's when things started to get truly strange. I was driving that stretch of road on a crisp autumn evening just after sunset when everything felt still and quiet. Weeks later, the memory still haunts me. The gas station was empty when I walked in, just me and the cashier behind the counter. I went to dry my hands in the bathroom when the door opened behind me. A man appeared, mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing a black suit with the top button fastened and no tie. His shoes were immaculate. Something about him felt out of place. He stood near the sinks and then spoke without looking directly at me. "You've seen too much light lately." I laughed it off as a weird joke at first, but when he turned and faced me, my stomach dropped. His eyes were wrong, the color seemed off. Pupils too large or irises too pale. "Not fake, just not right," he muttered. Then he demanded my phone. "You took a picture," he said with an eerie certainty. "Strangely," I complied. I handed over my device and he effortlessly tapped in the unlock code, a code I never shared. He glanced at the screen, then walked out. I followed, but he had vanished completely. No footsteps, no sound. The cashier remained at his post, flipping through a flyer and not looking up. When I asked if anyone had left, he said no one had entered. I checked the parking lot, nothing. No car, no trace of the strange man. 5 minutes passed as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then I realized my phone was back in my pocket. I hadn't felt him return it. When I unlocked the screen, everything was gone. Factory reset. Camera roll, texts, downloads wiped clean. Only my cloud-synced contacts remained. That night I connected the phone to my laptop and ran recovery software. Nothing. The metadata confirmed a hard reset precisely at 7:14 a.m., the exact time I was in that bathroom. I've told very few people about this. Those who listened assumed I dreamed it or imagined the encounter, but I know what happened. And that stretch of road, I've never gone back. I was out on the dock behind my place, quiet night, stars just starting to come out. I had my phone, trying to capture some shots of the sky. Everything felt normal, peaceful, still. But then something caught my eye over the lake's center. A dark shape hovered just above the water, completely motionless. Not like a bird or plane, this was different. Solid and sharp against the night sky, with no blinking lights or sound. I zoomed in with my camera, seeing a smooth, matte black oval shape. After a few minutes, it started drifting slowly sideways. Then, without warning, it shot straight up and vanished into the darkness. The next morning, a black car appeared at the end of my driveway, an older model from the early 2000s, pristine condition, no dents, no license plate. What struck me as odd was the lack of tire tracks or footprints on the gravel. The car was empty, no keys, no signs of anyone around. This continued for days. Each morning, the car remained in the exact same spot. I started leaving notes on the windshield, but they never moved, never disappeared. The car just sat there, silent and unchanging. Then one evening after dinner, I heard footsteps on the gravel. A man in a neat black suit stood near the driveway's end, his face mostly shadowed by the streetlight. He just watched me, saying nothing. Something about the whole situation felt deeply unsettling, though I couldn't explain exactly why. The lake returned to its usual stillness, the car remained motionless, and that strange hovering shape from the previous night was nowhere to be seen. I was left with more questions than answers, a sense of unease lingering in the quiet night. 2 winters ago in early February, I was walking my dog Benny before bed. It was around 12:45 a.m., cold but not snowing. We live in a quiet neighborhood in Spokane Valley near Pines and 16th, just a typical area with ranch-style houses and older trees, quiet after dark. Benny's a shepherd mix who needs his late-night walk or he'll pace all night. We were heading back up our street, about 5 houses from home, when Benny suddenly stopped and stared straight up. I thought he might be watching a bird or an owl, but when I looked, I saw something too. A triangle, definitely not a plane, and I've seen plenty of jets in my time. This thing was massive, blacker than the night sky, with only 3 faint points of light. Later, a strange encounter unfolded on my front porch. A man approached, and when I asked if he needed help, he said something cryptic. "The water remembers," he repeated it, and walked away into the darkness. Confused and unnerved, I ran inside and locked the door. Over the next week, his car kept appearing every morning, but he never returned. Odd things started happening. My phone would glitch when I tried to photograph the lake, and late at night I'd hear a faint humming that would stop when I went outside. One night around 3 a.m., I saw soft blue lights flickering over the lake, pulsing slowly. I tried to capture them on my phone, but the screen went black, showing a frozen camera image. When I looked up again, the lights had vanished. The man never reappeared, and the car stopped coming. But something lingered, a feeling of being watched when I'm near the water, like something waits just below the surface. His words echo in my mind, "The water remembers." Everything was perfectly still that night. A massive object, white at its corners, drifted overhead, moving impossibly slowly. No engine noise, no wind disturbance, just weightless gliding. The silence was profound. Not just the object, but everything around me seemed to dim, like someone had turned down the world's volume knob. Benny, my dog, sat motionless and stared until the thing vanished behind the northern trees. When I tried to capture a photo, my phone screen was frozen. It only started working again after the object disappeared. I didn't mention the incident to anyone. It seemed like another odd moment, maybe a military craft or an unfamiliar drone. Something to file away and forget. 2 days later, strange events began unfolding. I woke suddenly one Tuesday night a few hours after falling asleep. No sound, just that inexplicable, wide-awake feeling. Walking to check the thermostat, I noticed headlights across the street. A black sedan, older model with chrome trim, idled in front of the Wilkins house. At exactly 3:17 a.m., its headlights flashed, a slow, deliberate fade. Then it drove away smoothly, turning the corner and vanishing. I dismissed it initially, maybe someone turning around. But the next night, same scenario, 3:17 a.m., one flash, gone. This repeated nightly. Always the same car, always the same time. Sometimes parked near the Wilkins, sometimes closer to the Morgans, but always directly across from my house. By the 5th night, unease crept in. I set up my phone on a tripod, recording from 3:10 for 20 minutes. When I checked the footage the next morning, nothing. I'd been watching the street every night, and the car always showed up at exactly 3:17. No one believed me, not my wife who works nights at the hospital, not the neighbors, not even old Mr. Stee, and even old Harrington, who claims his dog barks at the slightest movement. The Morgans, who sleep with their blinds wide open, hadn't seen a thing. At first I tried reporting it. I called the non-emergency line, gave them the details, time, make, model, the whole pattern. They said they'd send a patrol, but I never knew if they actually did. So I started changing my routine. No more late-night walks with Benny. I'd walk him earlier, right after dinner, but I'd still check the window. Night after night, the car would appear. One week in, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I waited on the porch, lights off, hidden behind the column. Benny was inside, pacing nervously. He'd been on edge lately, didn't like me out of sight. At 3:17 it happened again. The car pulled up silently, just running lights, glowing, no headlights. It stopped directly across the street, engine running. The windows were impossibly dark, the car unnaturally clean, no front license plate. When I stepped out to get a better look, the driver's side window rolled down. A pale, thin man in a black suit sat inside, staring directly at me. We both remained completely still. After about 10 seconds, he raised his hand, not a wave but a flat, stop-like gesture. Then he rolled the window up and drove away without a sound. That was the last time I saw it. The following nights were empty, just silent streets. Part of me was relieved, but another part missed the predictability. Now I still find myself checking the street at 3:17, out of habit. Sometimes I think I hear an engine idling down the block, but when I look, there's nothing there. The morning was crisp in northern Minnesota, with late September hinting at the approaching fall. I'd been walking the forest's perimeter since dawn, tracking the minimal activity in this secluded area. The clearing stood silent, interrupted only by cicadas and dry leaves rustling. Something felt different that morning. The shift in the atmosphere made the usual quiet seem unsettling. Just as I prepared to return to the research station, an unusual sight caught my eye, a series of perfectly round scorch marks in the ground. 6 or 7 circular impressions, each about 2 feet across, formed a rough 1.5-foot diameter circle. The marks were deeply embedded, with blackened and cracked soil beneath them. Strangely, the surrounding area remained untouched. No burned leaves, no snapped branches, just these clean, symmetrical marks that looked like a giant cookie cutter had pressed into the earth. I circled the area methodically, searching for any explanation. No footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of human activity. Nothing made sense. The marks defied any natural phenomenon I'd encountered in my research. Methodically, I photographed the site, made detailed sketches, and collected soil samples. My GPS marked the location, and I radioed a brief description back to the station. The team's initial theories, a lightning strike or animal territorial marking, didn't align with the mark's precise geometry. An uneasy feeling settled over me. The forest felt too quiet, and I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, constantly glancing over my shoulder to find nothing. Days later, an unexpected visitor arrived at the research cabin. It was a simple structure, wood walls, a small kitchen, a single working room. When I cautiously opened the door, a tall man in an incongruous black suit stood before me. No identification, no badge. His dark eyes were steady, his voice flat and calm. "I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior," he said, offering no further explanation or introduction. "My name's Claire, and I work in graphic design in Seattle. Sometimes the city's noise and constant hustle become overwhelming, pushing me to seek solitude. Last October, on a damp, overcast day with early sunset, I found myself hiking alone in the Cascades, somewhere between Snoqualmie and Stevens Pass. The trail was quiet, with only occasional runners or dog walkers passing by. I was tracking my location, planning to cover 5 or 6 miles before turning back. The forest around me felt thick with recent rain, the air sharp but not yet cold. My goal was simple: escape from work, people, and the city's constant buzz. Later, a strange man appeared at my cabin. He didn't explain why he was there, but his presence felt unsettling. He studied my photos of scorch marks intensely and asked incredibly specific questions about my work tracking animals and collecting data. His gaze never wavered, analyzing every subtle movement and reaction. Oddly, he seemed to know exactly where the clearing was without asking for directions. When I offered to guide him, he politely declined, mentioning he had his own methods. He stayed for nearly an hour before leaving silently, his steps almost too quiet on the soft forest floor. After his departure, I meticulously checked my equipment and locks. Nothing was missing, yet something felt fundamentally wrong. In the following days, my mind kept returning to the scorched clearing, the man's unnerving calm, and his seemingly supernatural knowledge. I revisited the clearing multiple times, searching for changes or new marks, but found nothing unusual. Yet on certain nights, when the wind rustles through the trees just right, I swear I hear a low, unfamiliar hum, not like any animal or machine, but a faint vibration beneath the forest's skin. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages. Just that single, strange encounter and the lingering sensation that something out there was watching, though not particularly interested in me. I was hiking a trail I knew well, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. About 3 miles in, something caught my eye near some ferns. A black briefcase sitting perfectly upright on the ground. It looked like someone had carefully placed it there, with no markings or logos, just a scratched matte black surface that suggested it had been through some rough handling. Curiosity drew me closer, but the area was completely deserted. The briefcase was locked tight, no visible combination or keyhole that I could detect. It resembled a hard-shell case for camera equipment, but definitely sealed shut. I tried jiggling and shaking the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Assuming someone might return for it, I left the briefcase where it was and continued my hike. At first, everything seemed normal, but gradually, something felt off. The forest around me changed. The air grew heavy, almost oppressive, and sounds became muted. Bird calls and leaf rustlings seemed distant, as if someone had turned down the world's volume. I wondered if I was imagining things. When I reached the turnaround point and looked back, the briefcase was gone, completely vanished. I was certain it had been there moments before, but now there was. No trace, no footprints, no disturbed ferns, nothing. I tried to rationalize it, thinking I must be tired or stressed. The days that followed were strange. I constantly felt watched, but could never catch anyone. My phone started behaving oddly, battery draining quickly, calls interrupted by static, screen flickering unexpectedly. These small incidents were unsettling. A few days later, I returned to the trailhead, hoping to clear my head. As I walked the path, I noticed a man near the parking lot's edge. He wore a crisp black suit and tie with short, neatly combed dark hair. But his eyes were what truly unnerved me, not just tired, but completely hollow, like empty sockets with nothing behind them. I was out by myself on Devil's Ridge, a remote spot near Flagstaff, Arizona, that I'd discovered a couple of years earlier while hiking. Late September brought a dry, crisp air that turned surprisingly cold after sunset. My mission was to photograph the stars, and I brought all my gear: camera, tripod, lenses, and phone. About an hour after sunset, I set everything up just as the Milky Way began to emerge. The landscape was utterly silent, punctuated only by occasional wind whistling through scrub and pine needles. I was deep in concentration, adjusting aperture and checking exposure, focused on capturing the stunning night sky. That's when I noticed something unusual. On the ridge across the small valley, a figure stood completely motionless on a narrow rock outcrop, silhouetted against the starry backdrop. Dressed entirely in black, it was more like a statue than a person. No movement, no discernible features, just a dark shape. I assumed it was another late-night photographer or hiker, though the location was incredibly remote. I called out softly, "Hey, you okay over there?" Silence. I tried again, a bit louder. Nothing. The figure didn't move or say anything, just watched as I started down the trail. When I looked back, I thought maybe he would speak, but he simply turned and walked away, his footsteps quiet on the gravel. Something felt strange about the encounter, the briefcase that seemed to materialize and then vanish. The man with those empty eyes. I've looked carefully where I remembered seeing it, but found no trace. Now, even when I'm alone, I sometimes catch a glimpse of someone standing just beyond my peripheral vision, always in a black suit, always with those same blank eyes. The questions haunt me. What was in that briefcase? Why was it there? Why did it disappear? I have no answers. Just a persistent, unsettling sense that something was watching, waiting, or attempting to communicate in a way I cannot comprehend. The night was calm, and I was alone, far from anything familiar. My camera was set up, focused on the stars, when something caught my eye. It wasn't a movement or a shape hiding behind a tree. Instead, it simply vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch. I blinked, looked again, but nothing remained. Unease crept in, mixed with curiosity. Being so isolated, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light, the darkness playing with my perception, or just my imagination running wild. I returned to my camera, attempting to steady my shaking hands and resume my stargazing. Suddenly, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. A random string of digits. Something compelled me to answer. The voice was chilling, low, distorted, and cold. 3 words. "We're watching." Then silence. My heart raced as the cold air seemed to intensify. Should I leave or stay and investigate? I tried convincing myself it was a prank, but that voice didn't feel like a joke. Deciding to head home, I took the long way through winding desert roads. The radio crackled with static, and shadows seemed to dance around me. More than once I caught glimpses of headlights in my rearview mirror, disappearing when I looked directly. Exhausted and on edge, I finally reached home. My phone showed no missed calls, no texts, everything seemed normal. The next day, I returned to the ridge with friends. We searched for any sign of disturbance, footprints, tracks, anything unusual. Nothing. The rocks and dirt remained undisturbed, as if nothing had happened. That night, from my bedroom window, I saw a shadow slip between the trees across the street. I assumed it might be a neighbor or a stray animal, but when I looked again, nothing was there. I've continued visiting Devil's Ridge, never seeing that figure again. But sometimes I feel watched. A quiet pressure, like unseen eyes following me. Occasionally, my phone lights up with calls from unknown numbers. When I answer, only silence greets me. I can't explain what happened that night or who that figure was. All I know is that something strange lurks in the darkness of Devil's Ridge. Darkness wrapped the campground like a heavy cloak. Embers flickered in the dying fire, casting long shadows. A twig snapped somewhere beyond the light's reach. Mark froze, hand halfway to his coffee mug. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Something was watching, not just the usual night sounds or rustling branches, but something deliberate, something aware, a presence that felt ancient and patient, tracking their small circle of warmth with a gaze that did not blink.